Is this all you've got? Jian Wushuang maintained a calm facade, mocking, even being a gatekeeper seems too much for you. The one guarding the main gate of the Elder Palace was none other than the Grand Ancestor of the Xianxia Grand Ancestor, a Tier 6 peak-level emperor. Despite an incomplete origin source, he cultivated a sword Dao centered around the mastery of killing, compensating for the deficiency. His fierce sword technique was more than enough to confront peak-level Tier 6 emperors of the Elder Palace. It seemed challenging for Tiansong to surpass Xianxia. Provoked by Jian Wushuang, Tiansong's expression turned somewhat ferocious, evidently not expecting such resistance. Clearly, a mere Tier 6 ordinary emperor could contend with him to this extent. Come on, don't hide, Tiansong angrily shouted, taking the initiative this time. However, his speed was too slow. Jian Wushuang, hands behind his back, taunted, "Are you a water monkey? Why so slow?" With a slight turn, avoiding a fierce punch, Jian Wushuang raised his hand, unleashing a series of lethal sword strikes. While the opponent dared not kill him, Jian Wushuang had no such qualms. Idiot! Leaving behind these words, Jian Wushuang disappeared once again. Although he appeared calm on the surface, there was some uncertainty in his heart. One sword strike wouldn't harm Tiansong, but Tiansong could potentially land a punch that could nearly kill him. A body 50,000-fold against a divine body 59,000-fold was a significant gap. Even with the suppression from the origin source, Jian Wushuang was ultimately just a Dao Lord. Upon reappearing, Jian Wushuang sheathed the Jueyun sword, and the black aura around him dissipated, replaced by a swirling green mist. The power of life. This was his most formidable strength. The vigorous force of life circulated wildly, and his divine body erupted with immense power, greatly amplifying the origin source. As long as life endured, strength would be eternal. Jian Wushuang clenched his fist suddenly and roared, "Tiansong!" The sky began to change, and the surrounding seawater reversed its flow. If the previous skirmish could be considered a warm-up, this was now a serious confrontation. The aura emanating from him made everyone in the Elder Palace keenly aware. Many people had already gathered around. Look, it's Jian Wushuang. Why is he fighting someone from Longevity Hall? Someone questioned. Where there was confusion, there were also those who understood. The Elder Palace was not that large, and certain matters, once done, were hard to keep under wraps. Crucially, the master of Longevity Hall didn't conceal anything. Instead, he issued invitations and hosted a banquet for all corners. You don't even know about this? El heard it's the master of Longevity Hall forcibly taking Jian Wushuang's servant. As soon as an experienced elder spoke, another more well-informed person interrupted. What servant? That person is Gong Miaoyi, a peak-level Tier 5 emperor, not weaker than Jian Wushuang. There's no way she's such a strong servant. She must be Jian Wushuang's Dao companion. What? Dao companion? More spectators gathered at this point. When they heard that the master of Longevity Hall had taken Jian Wushuang's Dao companion, everyone became indignant. Longevity Hall is going too far. The first to support Jian Wushuang were the inheritors. Because Jian Wushuang was also an inheritor, naturally they sided with him, and he was also a creature of the universe. The first batch of heirs were fine. In the 4 great secret realms, the Elder Palace or the temples, their status was high. But as more heirs emerged, the Elder Palace no longer valued them. Especially after the Elder Palace developed so many treasures, attracting numerous inheritors, it became even more audacious. Except for a few inheritors, the rest were treated as emperors of the 4 great secret realms. In places like some treasures, inheritors should enter for free, but for the sake of immense benefits, there were still under-the-table charges. Like when Jian Wushuang entered that valley initially, the other party demanded 100 million cubic godstones. For their own people, however, they didn't take a single godstone. For stronger inheritors, the fees would be somewhat reduced. Apart from Beiwang Tower and Demon Sound Mountain, the prices in other places were outrageously high. Obviously, they regarded inheritors as easy targets. After all, coming out of the Grave God Mountain, treasures were bound to be on their bodies. Now, inheritors had been accumulating grievances for a long time. Longevity Hall had committed these actions, and now that Jian Wushuang and the other party had a dispute, it was evident that most people were on Jian Wushuang's side. The emperors of the 4 great secret realms didn't dare to take sides recklessly. These people had no background whatsoever. Jian Wushuang also sensed many eyes on him and couldn't help but reveal a slight smile in his heart. This was exactly what he wanted. Tiansong, since you treat me like this, today, I'll cut off your dog head. Jian Wushuang's aura surged once again. The power of that punch was enough to rival a top-level Tier 6 emperor. And this was not the end. He still had even more powerful cards. Life Universe. With a single thought, one thought universe was born. Subsequently, it descended with the force of devouring, coalescing into a black hole. Finally, all things converged to form the physical universe. However, the life universe encompassed all these forces within itself. Rise! Within a radius of 1,000,000 miles, everything was enveloped. Now, he wasn't afraid of revealing his trump cards. As long as the Tao merge was successful, there would be few opponents within the Qixin Temple. Tiansong was stunned. A sudden force appeared around him, driving him away, rendering his divine techniques ineffective, and compressing his power continuously. Unlike the envoy of all things, he couldn't nurture the power of all things within his body. In the life universe, except for Jian Wushuang, everything was equal. Even Tiansong, despite being an emperor, was just a life form. For the already suppressed Tiansong, attempting to withstand the punch from Jian Wushuang was exceedingly difficult. Boom! A punch directly shattered Tiansong's forearms. Subsequently, the enormous fist shadow tore through Tiansong's chest, leaving a gaping hole. Devour! Jian Wushuang's thought power gathered. The power of life dissipated, transforming into immense devouring force. A violent surge of divine body power began to leak from Tiansong's body. How is this possible? Tiansong was completely stunned. His divine body was dissipating. It wasn't a loss of strength, but the fundamental divine body was dissipating. Soon, his divine body had decreased by a factor of 100. At his level, the consumption of a 100-fold divine body required countless treasures, and he felt a deep pang of heartache. The more he felt the pain, the more Jian Wushuang became frenzied. Having devoured a 100-fold divine body, the opponent's 100-fold divine body could now supplement his own 50,000-fold divine body. Although he had only absorbed 20%, equivalent to a 20-fold divine body. Surprisingly, his own divine body could now ascend by 500-fold. Currently, it was already 50,500-fold. Since reaching the perfection of the extreme Tao, his power of devouring had transformed into the ability to consume all things. He could devour anything, turning it completely into the name of a black hole. This transformation greatly enhanced his power when controlling the black hole. Originally, there was a considerable gap between him and Emperor Wuyan, but now it had been bridged. He might actually reach the realm of the black hole before the successful Tao merge. If so, once the integration was successful, he would be a peak-level Tier 6 emperor, likely possessing a combat strength comparable to that of a supreme peak expert. The matter of the divine body was something he could handle now. As for the devouring of the origin source, he no longer cared. With the formidable power of life, why bother about the origin source of all things? But the devouring of the divine body was a different story. Though his current wealth was quite substantial, breaking through 60,000-fold after the Tao merge was more than sufficient. However, all those treasures were prepared for the Tao merge, and after the merging, he would be left with nothing. Devouring seemed to be a good choice. Just by devouring Tiansong's divine body, absorbing 20% of it, he increased 500-fold. How many treasures did that leave him with? Haha, Tiansong. One truly have to thank you for freely enhancing my divine body. Jian Wushuang laughed heartily. One side gained while the other side declined. Tiansong soon couldn't hold on. Jian Wushuang approached directly. A hand chop severed Tiansong's 2 arms. Such a nuisance. Grabbing those 2 arms, Jian Wushuang transformed into a devouring black hole, a terrifying aura enveloping Tian Song, rendering him immobile. Jian Wushuang. Tian Song's wailing cry echoed throughout the entire Yuanyang Lake. However, with the three palace masters, one in seclusion, one absent, and Emperor Lu Hua openly expressing support, no one would back Longevity Hall. The divine body continued to be devoured, and Tian Song was on the verge of collapse. This was a mental breakdown, and after this episode, it would probably be difficult for him to recover without spending some time in the valleys of Fenyang Island. The absorption continued, increasing to 1,000-fold. In the beginning, the process of devouring was arduous, but as it progressed, it became easier. The divine body weakened, and once it surpassed the opponents, it seemed likely that Jian Wushuang could devour Tian Song's divine body effortlessly in a short time. A divine body increased by a factor of 1,000, absorbing 20%, eventually transforming into Jian Wushuang's own. He elevated his divine body by a staggering 2,000-fold. At this stage, further enhancement of the divine body seemed impossible for him. However, with the means of devouring, his divine body continued to grow. 52,000-fold divine body. He was only a Tao Lord, and under normal circumstances, even if the extreme Tao was powerful, it would be impossible to bear such terrifying power. Yet, nourished by the power of life, he felt no signs of weakness. At this moment, Tian Song was like a dead dog, his head hanging low. Over the years, he had collected countless treasures to accumulate his divine body to this extent. However, in just a quarter of an hour, he had lost 1,000-fold. He was on the verge of complete collapse. Tai San. Now he finally admitted defeat and sought help. Jian Wushuang gripped Tian Song's neck forcefully, transforming into the black hole, his eyes pitch black. He looked towards the island where Longevity Hall was located and shouted, "If you don't appear now, he'll either die or be crippled." One Tian Song was not enough. If he could beat him up or disable Tai San, that would be ideal. Unfortunately, his current strength fell slightly short of achieving that. But forcing the opponent to come out was sufficient, and he looked forward to humiliating them later. Jian Wushuang was not worried at all. Longevity Hall. Inside a courtyard. Tai San was still leisurely playing chess, facing Vice Hall Master Zhong of the Enforcement Hall. Gong Miaoi was brewing tea on the side. However, the Si Tian was no longer calm, pacing anxiously on the side. With the Vice Hall Master of the Enforcement Hall present, he dared not speak openly and could only convey through voice transmission. Master, Hall Master Tian Song is on the verge of collapse. Tieshan's expression twisted, offering no reply. He also wanted to intervene and stop it. However, the Vice Hall Master of the Enforcement Hall was no pushover. If he dared to make a move, the other party might retaliate. The strength of Vice Hall Master Zhong was not to be underestimated. He was one of the two fierce generals under Wuxia. His status was high, and his power was not inferior. "Lord Zhong, you've lost again." Tai San reluctantly revealed a hint of a smile. When it came to chess, he was far superior, but the other party seemed intent on dragging the game. Vice Hall Master Zhong maintained a hearty demeanor and casually said, "Come, let's continue." The chessboard was restored to its original state once again. "I'll think. Let's call it a day today." Tai San stood up and said, "Tai San, I advise you not to meddle. Considering our past relationship, I'll give you a friendly reminder." Vice Hall Master Zhong said, "Jian Wushuang suffered a setback in front of Lord Wuxia. If you provoke him now, you'll be causing trouble for your big brother." This advice was sincere, but he was unaware of the underlying details. He was just a fish released by Wuxia. This was also the strategy discussed between Jian Wushuang and Wuxia. Tisan's brows furrowed into a knot. He was in a difficult position. If others had reached his doorstep, how could he lead his people in the future if he didn't step forward? If he went, Jian Wushuang would likely give him a hard time. It would be even more troublesome then. The matter of the origin source was of great importance, and he didn't want to get involved in this mess. All three palace masters avoided meeting Jian Wushuang. As the master of Longevity Hall, he dared not participate. Moreover, Longevity Hall managed the ownership of the treasures on the Yuanyang Lake. I have to go. If you were in my shoes, you would go too, Tai-san said coldly. Vice Hall Master Zhong smiled faintly, indifferent. Up to you, but you better not make a move. I am here with strict orders. If you act, none of us will have a good time. In his heart, Vice Hall Master Zhong leaned more towards these seniors. Though not from the same faction, he didn't want to see the seniors fighting over an inheritor. L will give you this face. Tyson turned to see Tian and said, Take Miaoi to the backyard. Without my order, she is not allowed to come out. Yes, Si Tian respectfully responded. However, Gong Miaoi's expression changed slightly. She had always been a pawn, surviving between the cracks. She thought things would be better in the heavenly realm, but now she found herself caught in a vortex again. At this moment, she regretted that she shouldn't have lingered here and should have left directly. Even without the Elder Palace, with her wealth and means, she should have been able to find her father. Now she had fallen into someone else's hands. Following Si Tian into the backyard, when she turned back and looked at Jian Wushuang in the sky, who seemed like a demonic god, she wished so much that Jian Wushuang had truly come to save her. But before the smile on her lips could form, her heart sank. Although she hadn't spent much time with Jian Wushuang, she understood that he was a person with a deep and unyielding temperament, not someone who could easily be moved emotionally. This time, he came under her name just to compete with those powerful beings. Lowering her head slowly, she followed Si Tian into the courtyard. As the wooden door closed, a tear fell. In the sky, Jian Wushuang held the life universe in his palm, with one hand on the universe and the other on Tian Song, waiting for Tai-san to show up. However, what he didn't expect was that the other party was also a cunning character. Jian Wushuang, can you come down for a discussion? Tai-san's voice had no anger, but rather, it was calm. Was this an attempt at negotiation? Jian Wushuang felt somewhat disdainful. The aura on his body undiminished. He descended directly into the courtyard. Tian Song, indistinguishable from a dead dog in his hand, was casually thrown aside. Seeing Vice Hall Master Zhong without any surprise, everything unfolded as planned. Where's Gong Miaoi? Jian Wushuang showed no courtesy. He sat down bluntly where Gong Miaoi had been sitting, cutting straight to the point. Vice Hall Master Tai-san remained unchanged in expression. Personally pouring a cup of tea for Jian Wushuang, he said calmly, Jian Wushuang, just a maidservant. Is it necessary to make such a fuss? Ha ha. Jian Wushuang laughed in anger, rubbing the armrest of the chair. Then, with a sudden force, he directly shattered the armrest, with wood chips flying out. Tai-san easily defused the situation. Defusing this was easy, but in front of so many people, how could Jian Wushuang be so disrespectful? If he endured, how would his subordinates view him? In the Fengting courtyard, many people were present. Originally intended to intimidate Jian Wushuang, it now backfired. The other Vice Hall Master of Longevity Hall stepped forward, angrily shouting, Jian Wushuang, you've gone too far. Humph. Jian Wushuang snorted disdainfully, saying, Who are you? Do you have the right to speak here? You. The Vice Hall Master, unaccustomed to such treatment, was about to rush forward but was held back by Tai-san. Tai-san took a deep breath, suppressing his anger. Holding the tea-infusing frame in his hand, he calmly said, Regarding Gong Miaoi's matter, I did overlook it. Even if you didn't come, I would personally visit with a generous gift. I didn't expect it to escalate to this point. He continued, Speak of your demands. If there's anything lacking or any requests, I, Tai-san, will definitely fulfill them. Jian Wushuang lifted the teacup, gave it a shake, and then, with intense anger in his eyes, directly splashed the tea towards Tai-san, angrily shouting, You've grown muddled in your old age, asking me to make demands? He chuckled with exasperation. I want the origin source of all things in the Beiwang Tower. Can you afford that? Don't think just because you're a hall master you can spout nonsense freely. Otherwise, I'll wipe the floor with you in one go. A violent aura emanated from Tai San, evaporating the tea on his face. He was about to erupt, but upon hearing about the origin source of all things, he had to forcefully suppress the anger in his heart. He had already informed his elder brother, Chong Feng Sword God, about the situation here. Even his elder brother advised against provoking Jian Wushuang, stating that the latter just wanted to extort some treasures, pay him off, and that would be the end of it. But now, Jian Wushuang was not giving any face. It wasn't about money. It was about humiliating him. Vice Hall Master Zhong stared blankly, having shifted his position to the back. If it were him, he would probably have taken action long ago. He admired Tai San's patience. He could endure such provocations. Wasn't Tai San quite domineering before? Why did he seem so restrained now? Jian Wushuang. Tai San's expression finally darkened. He glared at Jian Wushuang as if wanting to eat him, gritting his teeth and saying, "If it weren't for my big brother's instructions, you would have died 100 times already." The last sentence was just a threat. In the Elder Palace, who would dare to kill Jian Wushuang? If someone dared to kill him, forget Jinling, they would have to fight for their lives against the consequences. Let me also tell you this, if I haven't achieved Dao Merge yet, you wouldn't even have the privilege of sitting down and talking to me. Without your big brother, you wouldn't even be able to secure your position as a hall master. Both of them stood up simultaneously, their bodies close, faces almost touching, staring into each other's eyes. Today, let Gong Miaoyi leave with me. Either you kneel down and kowtow to me 3 times, or I'll consider this marriage settled. Jian Wushuang stood up straight, rubbed his forehead, and then said, "Alternatively, you can give me the origin source of all things. Don't say I didn't give you face. After I finish my demands, you figure out how to handle it." These 3 demands were enough to ruin the reputation of the other party. Letting Gong Miaoyi go with him was absolutely impossible. He had already sent out the invitations, and having a Dao companion run away with someone else meant losing face completely. As for the origin source of all things, even with 10 lives, he wouldn't dare to decide. In the end, the only option left was to kowtow. But that was no better than just killing him directly. Vice Hall Master Zhong on the side couldn't bear to watch any longer. This was such a great humiliation. For the sake of a woman, it wasn't worth it. "All of you, step back." Tai San's face was trembling, waving his hand to signal those people to disperse. The Vice Hall Master of Longevity Hall showed some emotion. Letting them leave, was he really ready to compromise? If that was the case, then the Longevity Hall would be disgraced for a lifetime. Being stepped on the face by a Dao Lord. "Hall Master, we..." But before they could finish speaking, Tai San's face turned as pale as wax. He raised his head, glanced at the crowd, and roared, "Get lost!" Swish! People didn't dare to linger any longer, and their hearts turned cold. The usually imposing Hall Master of Longevity Hall had now fallen to such a state, about to kneel to a Dao Lord. After everyone left, only Tai San, Jian Wushuang, and Vice Hall Master Zhong remained. Earlier, there were many people around, but now there is no one else. I, Tai San, personally offer you a gift. The treasure within this mustard seed is worth 30,000 cubic universe crystals. My lifelong accumulation. Please accept it. Tai San presented a mustard seed with both hands in front of Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang's gaze flickered. 30,000 cubic universe crystals were not particularly attractive to him at the moment. With his own possession of several 100,000 cubic universe crystals, he didn't lack these 30,000. On the contrary, the other party having 30,000 cubic universe crystals probably gained some benefits privately, accumulating over millions of years. There would be more in the future. 30,000 cubic universe crystals weren't a significant loss. He could obtain more in the future. However, Gong Miaoyi could not be returned to Jian Wushuang. Others might not know, but Tai San was clear in his heart that Gong Miaoyi's constitution was very special and particularly suitable for dual cultivation. As long as he found Gong Miaoyi's father, Gong Miaoyi promised him dual cultivation. Now that he had obtained information about Gong Miaoyi's father, after the grand wedding, he would surely bring Gong Miaoyi to find her father. Once they started dual cultivation, his strength could be further enhanced. There was hope for the Supreme Peak, and the hope was significant. By then, the two brothers would both be Supreme Peak experts, and within the Elder Palace they would not fear anyone. So, Gong Miaoyi would never be let go. The reason he could endure was precisely this. In case Jian Wushuang insisted on taking Gong Miaoyi away, when he brought this matter to Palace Master Lu Hua, the other party wouldn't help him. Moreover, he didn't stand on the right side. If it weren't for his older brother's advice, he would have almost lost his temper. Enduring for a while was fine. After he stepped into the Supreme Peak, there would be no need to fear Jian Wushuang. Even if Jian Wushuang succeeded in merging Dao in the future, he would also be a Supreme Peak expert, and there would be no need to consider Jian Wushuang's opinions. After all, the Elder Palace was the private force of Jinling. It's not that there weren't other ultimate emperors, but those ultimate emperors were not related to them, at most giving some face. No matter how grandly they spoke, it was just potential. Ultimate emperors didn't have much power. They were busy cultivating, with no time to bother about such matters. This time, he hadn't expected it to be so easily resolved. He wasn't afraid that the other party wouldn't make a move. He was afraid they would endure it indefinitely. The purpose of coming here was to let outsiders know that in the future, if the Elder Palace were to pass judgment, there would be significant reasons behind it. His Dao companion was taken away by someone, and the origin source of all things didn't favor him either. Could be considered making a name for oneself. Jian Wushuang's gaze gradually turned cold. Now, not to mention 30,000 cubic universe crystals, even if it were 300,000, he would continue to make a scene. 30,000 cubic universe crystals? Are you trying to dismiss me like a beggar? He directly brushed off the mustard seed in the other party's hand. As soon as these words were spoken, Tai San could no longer endure it. He lifted his head, stared fiercely at Jian Wushuang, and his aura erupted at that moment, directly forcing Jian Wushuang to retreat. To create a false impression, Jian Wushuang retreated for thousands of miles, smashing countless palaces and pavilions and stirring up countless sword qis. From the outside, it seemed that Jian Wushuang would not only escape death this time but also suffer severe injuries. Tai San was very surprised. He had only released some aura, not intending to take action. Vice Hall Master Zhong, who was closest, could also perceive Tai San's thoughts. Therefore, he didn't intervene. What's going on? Vice Hall Master Zhong couldn't care less about other matters. Wu Zhu had given the order to ensure Jian Wushuang's safety. Tai San's expression looked ugly, hastily explaining, "Vice Hall Master Zhong, you must testify for me. I really didn't take any action. Tai San, you've gone too far, seizing my Dao companion, robbing my fortune. We are irreconcilable," Jian Wushuang angrily shouted. The distant voice echoed, and many onlookers heard it. In the wake of such a major incident, Dongshang and Wan Yan were also present at the scene. Upon hearing Jian Wushuang's piercing roar, some were moved and immediately approached. The strong members of the Longevity Hall on the periphery wanted to intervene, but Dongshang, now possessing the combat power of a top-level Tier 6 emperor, was not easily stopped. With such a significant event unfolding, the emperor of the Longevity Hall dared not act decisively. He merely symbolically attempted to block them, then let the two enter. After all, so many inheritors were watching from the outside. If they were to truly engage, it might provoke public outrage. "Brother Wushuang, we're late." Dongshang and Wan Yan entered the ruins and saw Jian Wushuang in tattered clothes, blood at the corners of his mouth. They were both shaken and then angrily looked towards the main hall of the Longevity Hall in the distance. Jian Wushuang stood there, his face worn. But deep down he was overjoyed. "Tai San, I will remember today's humiliation." Jian Wushuang looked at the opponent unwillingly and said coldly. The air of resentment instantly soared. "Let's go." Under the protection of Dongshang and Wan Yan, Jian Wushuang left the Longevity Hall. Only Tai San and Deputy Hall Master Zhong of the Enforcer Hall remained stunned in place. "Tai San, it seems you've truly offended Jian Wushuang this time," After leaving these words, Deputy Hall Master Zhong also left directly. Subsequently, the strong members of the Longevity Hall approached. Hall Master, there's nothing to fear. Jian Wushuang has gone too far. It's normal for you to be unable to resist taking action. Someone comforted. Tai San's expression became even more gloomy. His violent aura directly pushed the person who spoke back several steps, and he roared, "All of you, get lost." Now, he had tarnished his reputation beyond redemption. He couldn't possibly explain to his subordinates that he didn't dare to take action just to intimidate Jian Wushuang. If he said that there would be no way to mix in the future. But if he didn't explain, even his own people would assume that he had ruthlessly dealt with Jian Wushuang. As the crowd dispersed, their gazes underwent some changes. Tai San's image was maintained, still as imposing as ever. However, offending Jian Wushuang was now a fact. Not only did he snatch Jian Wushuang's Dao companion, but he also came to demand the origin source of all things from Jian Wushuang and ended up being beaten. This matter quickly spread throughout the Elder Palace. Palace Master Lu Hua personally brought a generous gift to visit Jian Wushuang. He was completely unaware of the matter and had not heard any explanations. Regarding the origin source of all things, even though it had been decided, he would fully support Jian Wushuang. Whether he could obtain it was another matter, but he had already shown his stance. Normally, Jian Wushuang wouldn't go to Longevity Hall to demand it. The matter of the origin source of all things was significant. Although it was said that all the treasures of the Elder Palace on the surface were under the jurisdiction of Longevity Hall, the origin source of all things was something they were not qualified to arrange, let alone Longevity Hall. According to his speculation, it was probably because of the Dao companion. Although Jian Wushuang suffered a setback this time, Palace Master Lu Hua was secretly delighted. In this way, the relationship between Jian Wushuang and the faction of Changfeng Sword God would become even more distant. They could consider that they had taken different paths. At this moment, Jian Wushuang was in the enforcement hall. Lu Hua thought that Jian Wushuang was here to recuperate, so he came specially to express sympathy and comfort. The result was that upon arrival, Jian Wushuang had already been thrown into the great prison. Waiting outside for him was Wuxia. "Wuxia, my old friend, have you lost your mind? Why did you arrest Jian Wushuang at this time?" Lu Hua was deeply shocked. According to common sense, Jian Wushuang had the best relationship with Wuxia among all the people in the elderly palace. Why did Wuxia still arrest Jian Wushuang? Wuxia stood there with a sinister air between his eyebrows. Palace Master Lu Hua, there are some things you may not be aware of. Jian Wushuang seriously injured a vice hall master of Longevity Hall in the Longevity Hall. If it weren't for Brother Tai San's intervention, he would have almost perished. Wu's were explained with righteousness. According to the regulations of the Law Enforcement Hall, Jian Wushuang has committed a serious crime and must be detained in prison awaiting punishment. Upon hearing this, Lu Hua was completely stunned. Suddenly, he thought of something. At this moment, Tai San, wearing a smile, walked out of the hall and greeted, "Greetings, Palace Master Lu Hua." Upon seeing the newcomer, Emperor Lu Hua's expression turned completely cold. "Tai San, did you orchestrate this matter?" Emperor Lu Hua asked coldly. If that were the case, he would have to sever ties with Wuxia in the future. Last time, when Wuxia suggested adding another palace master, Lu Hua politely declined. He never expected that Wuxia would completely take the wrong path, colluding with Changfeng. With Changfeng and Wuxia dealing with Qingyou, Lu Hua might be forced to step down and let Wuxia take his place. Tai San had lost the earlier anger at this moment, expressing happiness instead. The enforcement hall acts according to regulations, and they do it very well. It has nothing to do with Longevity Hall. Fine. Emperor Lu Hua, in extreme anger, laughed sarcastically, saying, "Very good. You handle things really well." Leaving these words behind, he swung his sleeve and was about to leave directly. However, thinking of Jian Wushuang, he stopped in his tracks, not turning around, just saying coldly, "Engaging in private combat, seriously injuring the elders. This matter is indeed very serious. I will personally inquire. Then he directly tore through the space and arrived at the bottom of Yuanyang Lake. There, a water prison existed. At this moment, Jian Wushuang was suppressed in this place. After leaving Longevity Hall not long ago, Wu Zhuo personally took him away and brought him here. Everything was within the plan. Even though Tai San was furious, he was cautious. He directly informed his elder brother, Chong Feng Sword God, of everything that had happened. After learning about it, Chong Feng Sword God pondered for a while and speculated that Wu Zhuo intended to use Jian Wushuang to seek the position of the palace master. He instructed Tai San to go find Wu Zhuo and explain their intentions. As long as they could suppress Jian Wushuang, they would fully support Wu Zhuo to become the palace master. Moreover, they would actively recruit Qingniu and, in one stroke, pull down Emperor Lu Hua. This way, there would still be 3 palace masters, and the interests would remain unchanged. The key was to thoroughly offend Jian Wushuang. They decided to take this extreme measure, pulling down Jian Wushuang along with Wu Zhuo without hesitation. However, they didn't know that by doing so, they fell right into the plans of Jian Wushuang and Wu Zhuo. Lu Hua hurriedly arrived at the scene. Seeing Jian Wushuang imprisoned, he inwardly cursed Wu Zhuo for being foolish. Jian Wushuang was now a distinguished figure in the Elder Palace, and Jinling would undoubtedly be aware of it. Once the Dao merge succeeded, Jian Wushuang might become the successor of the Qixin Temple. Offending such a figure for the sake of a palace master position seemed irrational. One could only say that Wu Zhuo's vision was becoming increasingly narrow. Upon Lu Hua's arrival, Wu Zhuo followed suit. Release him first. I'll vouch for him. Emperor Lu Hua spoke up. Wu Zhuo hesitated for a moment, then lowered his voice and said, "The soonest will be at least 10,000 years later. After Tai San's wedding, I'll release Jian Wushuang." You! Emperor Lu Hua's expression darkened. Pointing at Wu Zhuo, "How can I describe you? Jian Wushuang is an inheritor of the ultimate Dao. Now that he's almost at the completion stage of his ultimate Dao, aren't you afraid he'll come after you once he achieves it?" Wu Zhuo coldly snorted, glaring at Emperor Lu Hua, and angrily said, "Hesitation and indecision. The last time I chose the palace master, you said the same thing. You really disappoint me." Whether this statement was part of the act or an inadvertent revelation remained unclear. The last time Lu Hua served as the palace master, he behaved improperly, and Wu Zhuo still harbored some resentment. Fine, since that's the case. Go ahead and walk your solitary path. Emperor Lu Hua didn't want to bring up the events of the last time because it was indeed his fault. If he had been more firm, Wu Zhuo might have actually become the palace master. Unfortunately, Chongfeng's strength was too weak, and once Wu Zhuo took over, the alliance between the two had already disrupted the balance in the current Elder Palace. Lu Hua was aware of this and chose not to insist any further. Now, with the two of them joining forces, they had reached a delicate balance with Qingniu and Chongfeng. However, this delicate balance was about to be disrupted soon, and this time Wu Zhuo wouldn't be standing by his side. Instead, he would find himself in a disadvantaged position, and due to the matter of the origin source of all things, he might even end up isolated. By then, the position of the palace master might be at risk. There was no time to turn back now. He could only bet everything on Jian Wushuang and see it through. The more it came to this, the more he needed to quickly bring Jian Wushuang out. A timely help is better than an embellishment when it's already perfect. Hallmaster Wu Zhuo, it's fine if you want to keep him in captivity, but I need to interrogate him. Let me in to see Jian Wushuang. This shouldn't violate any rules, right? Emperor Lu Hua regained his indifferent expression. This time, Wu Zhuo did not refute. He took out a token and opened the prison, allowing Emperor Lu Hua to enter. Once inside the prison, Palace Master Lu Hua immediately set up a barrier to prevent Wu Zhuo from eavesdropping outside. Later, he took steps towards Jian Wushuang. Palace Lord. Jian Wushuang struggled to rise, his breath extremely weak. He wasn't concealing his aura. Instead, he intentionally let Wu Zhuo inflict serious injuries on him, suppressing without recovery. If needed, he could restore himself to the peak at any moment. Such was the terror of the power of life. Emperor Lu Hua keenly felt this and quickly approached, supporting Jian Wushuang and infusing his own power to help him regain some strength. There are some things you should come to me for. Wu Zhu has always been unreliable. I forgot to remind you. Emperor Lu Hua's expression was regretful. Jian Wushuang was stunned for a moment, then showed anger. Through gritted teeth, he said, I was careless this time. I didn't expect Wu Zhu to play me. Don't worry, he can't harm you. I will find a way to get you out as soon as possible, within 10,000 years. Emperor Lu Hua reassured. 10,000 years. Jian Wushuang's eyes showed a hint of anxiety. He spoke, Palace Master, can you get me out before the grand wedding of Taisan? His expression changed, determination in his eyes. He even bowed directly, requesting, Palace Master Lu Hua, I'm begging you. As long as you let me out, I will be eternally grateful for this great kindness. Jian Wushuang, what are you doing? Emperor Lu Hua reached out to help Jian Wushuang up, saying hurriedly, Don't worry. Even if I don't hold the position of Palace Master, I'll still get you out. After all, he wouldn't hold the position for much longer, and he wasn't afraid of being caught by Changfeng and Qingniu for his previous actions. He might as well cause a disturbance in the law enforcement hall's prison at that time. Upon hearing the assurance, Jian Wushuang finally stood up, joy evident in his eyes. After leaving behind some treasures to restore the origin source, Emperor Lu Hua departed. Jian Wushuang watched his departing figure, feeling a stirring in his heart. Despite knowing that the other had clear objectives, the willingness to abandon everything to help him earn genuine gratitude from Jian Wushuang. He vowed that when he ascended to the throne, he would not mistreat Lu Hua. Emperor Lu Hua, upon leaving the prison, didn't spare a glance at Wu Zhuo. With a cold snort, he waved his sleeve and departed. He was disappointed in Wu Zhuo. The two had been good friends for many years, and now their relationship seemed to have crumbled. In the ancient era, although Emperor Lu Hua was not the direct heir of Qishan Temple, he came from a prestigious family, a legitimate descendant of a universe master. Venturing through the river of time, he met Wu Zhuo, and the two had experienced numerous trials together. It was a friendship that transcended life and death. Humph. This time I'm one step ahead of you, Wu Zhuo muttered to himself. After glancing at Jian Wushuang in the prison, he turned and left. News of his suppression quickly spread. Even the inheritors on the Grave God Mountain learned a fair amount. In the earthly realm's secret realm, Hu Qing also received the news promptly. Brother Wushuang, this time I can't help you. Hu Qing slightly closed his eyes, situated in an extremely malevolent pool. Meanwhile, in the shadows, Long Yi marveled at everything and reported the situation to Jin Ling inside the prison. Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged in the corner, and there was no change in his aura. However, in the sea of origin source within him, his origin source clone was practicing the pinnacle supreme technique he created. As a Tao Lord, he could create a pinnacle supreme technique, making him one of a kind. Eternal Calamity. The first sword move was still a bit rough. Swords may be lifeless, but strength is alive. Jian Wushuang shook his head. It was too difficult to merge the power of life, so he had to resort to his supreme technique, channeling the life power into the sword chi. Only through this could he unleash immense combat strength. Whether it was the formidable power of all things or the power of samsara, merging them onto his own Tao was exceedingly challenging. The journey of life is, in itself, countless tribulations. Jian Wushuang floated above the origin source sea, wielding the Juyun sword. The Eternal Calamity sword technique can also represent an eternal space, an eternal universe. Like all things, it is only in a different direction. The first calamity is in the Tao of the sword. Jian Wushuang suddenly raised his hand, and the Juyun sword struck out, causing ripples across the four seas. This sword technique could slay a Tier 6 emperor. The pinnacle supreme technique Eternal Calamity was his creation throughout his life, intimately linked with his journey. The tribulations he had faced were far more than just a myriad of calamities. When he was weak, the first calamity before him was the Tao of the sword. Now, having mastered it all in one sword, It was a testament to the way of the sword, and a declaration to himself. Although the extreme Tao was powerful, it had followed him for a short time, lacking any special sentiment. The sword Tao was different. From its faint beginning, it accompanied him, as if it were innate. Otherwise, he wouldn't have constantly diverted his attention to explore the Tao of the sword. Having a more potent extreme Tao, why bother cultivating the ultimate Tao? It would only make him uneasy. During the Tao merge, he only needed to abandon the sword Tao. But if he did, would he be content? Jian Wushuang pondered deeply within himself. The myriad Tao sword sovereign. In the vast array of Taos he mastered, he singularly cherished the Tao of the sword. He aimed to exalt the sword Tao, elevating it to untouchable heights. Among the myriad Taos, he sought to bring the sword to its pinnacle, the strongest and most perfect posture. Moreover, the sword's decisiveness suited him well. Eternal calamity sword technique. Jian Wushuang's eyes burned with passion as he gazed at the sword, exclaiming, "Finally, success!" Although the ultimate sword Tao had not yet entered the 9th realm, the sword strike he had created could already slay a Tier 6 emperor. Due to the transformed power of life infused within, this sword strike contained too much. With a swing of the sword, it wasn't just a simple force of killing. Above, it also harbored thought power, heart power, devour, the power of all things, and even life itself. A strike of the sword could bring about annihilation. "Let's call it annihilation then," Jian Wushuang murmured. Then he resumed his cultivation. He possessed numerous universe crystals, rapidly advancing in the realm of space and continually exploring. The boundary of the black hole was also approaching. This time his adversaries were many, not just Tai-San alone, but the entire Elder Palace. Fortunately, the strongest of the 3 palace masters was in seclusion, and Palace Master Changfeng was absent. Only Palace Master Lu Hua offered full support. Wu Zhuo was the manipulator behind the plan. With the Supreme Peak not making a move, only those peak-level emperors remained. Although Wu Zhuo would support him in secret, everything was uncertain. He had to enhance his strength to the utmost. Otherwise, there was a risk of exposure. Their plan was in progress, and Xinling's scheme was also unfolding. The Supreme Peak expert hidden in the shadows manipulated some powerful figures within the Elder Palace in secrecy. A darkness was enveloping the entire Elder Palace. In the shadows of the Elder Palace, Shadow 3, 16, and 17 are in position, ready to move at any moment. No rush, wait a bit longer. If we act now, we'll expose ourselves. We can't be hasty. Jian Wushuang is in prison, and Shadow 14 is in the enforcement hall. Nothing can go wrong. Wait a bit more. This Shadow 3 was one of the top 3 figures in the Shadow sect, possessing supreme peak strength. Time passed swiftly. Thousands of years in the mundane mortal world marked the birth of a civilization, the succession of several dynasties. Yet, for cultivators it was but a fleeting moment, a breath. On this day, the island where Longevity Hall was located was exceptionally lively, with all the palaces transformed into shades of red. The areas previously destroyed by Jian Wushuang had long since been restored. Not to mention, today was the grand wedding of Tai-San, the hall master of Longevity Hall, and the entire island had undergone a thorough renovation. At 10 in the morning, everyone on the island was busy. For this grand wedding, Tai-San had brought in a group of Tao lords from the outside world to handle the preparations, as the manpower on the island was insufficient and needed careful arrangements. The visitors this time were all significant figures, each carrying weight in the Elder Palace. Even the rival Divine Temple had sent formidable individuals. Inside the main hall of Longevity Hall, numerous tables were already set up. Some relatively weaker emperors had sensibly arrived early, giving face to Tai-San. In the Grand Hall's entrance, Tai-San personally welcomed each guest. Whether they were Tier 4 or Tier 6 emperors, he engaged in warm conversations with everyone. Even several Tier 6 emperors were arranged outside the island, welcoming from a distance. However, most of the guests this time were native emperors from the 4 great secret realms and some elders. As for the inheritors, they were few and far between. Some of the inheritors tied to the Elder Palace did come, such as Emperor Xian. Master! Xian respectfully bowed. Disciple, you receive the distinguished guests here. I'll go to the rear hall to take a look. Tyson always had a smiling face, and he had nothing to say to this disciple. Not only in cultivation but also in financial matters, he had provided substantial assistance. Xian's situation was similar to his, with average aptitude but exceptionally good luck. Moreover, Xian had never disappointed him. Each time, he steadily improved. Now, he had already reached the peak level Tier 5, passing through the 48th level in the Beiwang Tower. Not long after breaking through Tier 5, he possessed such strength. In the future, he was expected to be a supreme genius. Tyson put down what he was doing and walked into the rear hall. Inside the hall, bright red silk was arranged, very festive. Meowie! Tyson strolled over, his face full of smiles. Gong Meowie smiled lightly. Is everything arranged outside? Everything is ready, just waiting for you. After today. Gong Meowie raised her head, looking at Tyson, and said with anticipation, Is my father really in the mine? Tyson nodded and said, I didn't dare to inform Big Brother about this matter, but I asked the people around him to help me investigate. That swordsman is very similar to your father. When shall we go then? Gong Meowie said happily. After today, any time. Then Tyson hesitated. Gong Meowie's expression became serious, saying solemnly, As long as we find my father, I'll entrust myself to my husband for the rest of my life. Good. I won't let you down. Tyson was very excited. Initially, he was afraid that Gong Meowie wouldn't agree. After all, being a peak-level Tier 5 emperor, generally they had pride, and she was also a woman with a unique constitution. Now, he had worried too much. As long as he obtained Gong Meowie, with his profound skills, entering the Supreme Peak, he would naturally not mistreat her. By then, he could also help Gong Meowie swiftly break through and step into Tier 6. Thinking about it sounds beautiful. The couple were both Tier 6 emperors, a romantic tale within the Elder Palace. Moreover, Gong Meowie's potential was good. He could even arrange for Gong Meowie to go to the Grave God Mountain. Just get a spot. This matter isn't difficult. Everything in the future is good, but there are unexpected changes. At this time, outside the enforcement hall's prison, two groups of people had already taken their positions. One group was personally arranged by Emperor Lu Hua, and they were trusted subordinates. The other group was composed of powerful agents of the shadow sect lurking within the Elder Palace. Among the group arranged by Emperor Lu Hua, there were 3 Tier 6 peak-level emperors, enough to break the restrictions here. Moreover, there were over 10 top-level Tier 6 emperor experts, enough to hold off the people from the enforcement hall. At this moment, Wuxia was not present. He had gone to the longevity hall. Over the years, he had become close with Tyson, naturally wanting to show his support. Now, inside the enforcement hall, there were only Deputy Hall Master Zhong and 3 Tier 6 emperors in attendance. The strong individuals of the enforcement hall were mostly in the northern region, while those in the Elder Palace were in the minority. The Elder Palace was teeming with formidable individuals, and no one dared to act recklessly here. Outside the prison, there were no guards, as there were restrictions in place, not fearing anyone daring to attempt a prison break. Even if someone dared to come, once the restrictions were attacked, the enforcement hall's experts could arrive at the scene in no time. Both groups of people were very patient, as if they were waiting for a command. Take action! Take action! Emperor Lu Hua seized the timing and directly gave the command. At the same time, the hidden Supreme Peak expert in the shadows issued a command. 2 groups of people simultaneously appeared in different locations, but their goals were the same. Breaking into the prison. Boom! 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 Ferocious forces suddenly attacked the restrictions outside the prison. Deep within the prison, Jian Wushuang suddenly opened his eyes. Although unaware of the situation outside, the arrival of attackers meant that today might be the day he would leave, a crucial part of the plan. Inside the law enforcement hall on this day, Vice Hall Master Zhong was not surprised. He had long anticipated a rescue attempt for Jian Wushuang, so he was well prepared. With a command, several Tier 6 emperors and hundreds of Tier 5 peak-level emperors emerged. "Follow me to capture the rebels." Vice Hall Master Zhong, rugged and carrying a mountain-splitting battle axe, led hundreds of emperor-level experts, tearing through space and arriving outside the prison. At this moment, both sides were somewhat surprised. The intelligence is incorrect. Who are the opponents? Could the palace master have made other arrangements? However, with the same goal in mind, there was no immediate conflict. Both sides exerted all their efforts to destroy the restrictions. But now, Vice Hall Master Zhong and his hundreds of people had arrived. The majestic Tao image erupted directly, and Vice Hall Master Zhong's strength was comparable to a Supreme Peak expert. His appearance startled many. The mysterious Supreme Peak figure in the shadows couldn't act recklessly. They could only command the crowd to intercept the enforcers from the Law Enforcement Hall. Vice Hall Master Zhong's Tao image, towering for millions of miles, slowly raised his hand and struck with an axe, causing the lake water to retreat, directly hitting the two groups of attackers targeting the restrictions. "Let me see who has the audacity to do this." Boom! A violent aura directly forced back several Tier 6 emperors. The means of concealing their auras on their bodies also shattered. "Wang Han, you've got quite the nerve to dare to rob the prison." Vice Hall Master Zhong, at a glance, recognized the leader of the peak-level Tier 6 emperor. He was the first fierce general under Palace Master Lu Hua. With peak-level Tier 6 combat power, he was only a hair's breadth away from him. Seeing the opponent recognized him, Wang Han didn't bother hiding and rushed forward. "Continue attacking the restriction. I'll stop him," Vice Hall Master Zhong sneered. "You think you can defeat me on your own? Haha. Although I can't defeat you head-on, I still have the means to stop you." Wang Han was very confident. In Beiwang Tower, Wang Han had reached the Tier 6 complete strength by reaching the 60th floor. Vice Hall Master Zhong, on the other hand, reached the 61st floor. The difference between the two was just one floor. Although he would be suppressed in strength, he wouldn't instantly lose. It was easy to stop Vice Hall Master Zhong for 10 breaths. Breaking the restriction required 10 breaths. Two groups of people outside exerted themselves to attack. Jian Wushuang in the prison was tense. As long as the restriction was opened, he would tear through space and escape directly. He would head straight for Longevity Hall. Wuxia was already waiting there. Moreover, most of the enforcers from the Law Hall had been mobilized to the northern region. People like Vice Hall Master Zhong couldn't stop him at all. Even if he killed some people, the inheritors and the powerful emperors from the 4 great secret realms wouldn't be able to stop him. Even the strong from the Elder Palace, there were few who dared to come forward and stop him. The destruction origin source would bring about the collapse of the entire Longevity Hall. When that happened, the strong would scatter, causing chaos. Taking advantage of this, Jian Wushuang could lead Gong Miaoi directly to the central hall, ride the teleportation array, and head straight to the northern region. However, teleportation was only possible to the northern region from the Elder Palace. Only after reaching the northern region could they travel to other major states. Boom! The external battles raged fiercely. Two groups on the prison raid worked simultaneously. One attacking the restrictions and the other intercepting the members of the Law Enforcement Hall. "Li Mizhou, it's you." Vice Hall Master Zhong, splitting the space with an axe, revealed the Supreme Peak expert behind him. Vice Hall Master Zhong was astonished. Li Mizhou was a rare peak-level Tier 6 expert in the northern region, comparable to the Xianxia Grand Ancestor. Unexpectedly, he had concealed his strength, turning out to be a Supreme Peak powerhouse. Moreover, he dared to plot such a world-defying event as the raid on the prison. There must be other secrets behind this. The group led by Wang Han raided the prison because of Emperor Lu Hua. However, Li Mizhou and the other native emperors of the northern region had no connection to Jian Wushuang. How could they dare to raid the prison? Vice Hall Master Zhong, you shouldn't have discovered me. Li Mizhou's eyes contracted, his exposure evident. At this point, he couldn't care about much. If they didn't release Jian Wushuang, they were all finished. A terrifying Supreme Peak aura instantly descended, charging towards Vice Hall Master Zhong. The disturbance caused by the appearance of the Supreme Peak expert spread instantly. But when the aura spread for thousands of miles, it suddenly stopped, replaced by an even more horrifying presence. Within that aura, faint demonic sounds resonated. Divine General Ma'in. Everyone was startled. According to common sense, the ancient beings like the demon sound Divine General should not intervene in the matters of the Elder Palace. However, a fight at the Supreme Peak level had broken out, and it was related to Jian Wushuang, so the demon sound Divine General had no choice but to act. He directly suppressed the situation here. Li Mizhou, who had just exposed himself as a Supreme Peak expert, was heavily injured directly. Simultaneously, the restrictions began to shatter amidst the fluctuations of the demonic sound. Although only slight cracks appeared, Jian Wushuang seized the opportunity. Before the cracks could heal, he tore through the surrounding space without restrictions and escaped. As Jian Wushuang left, the demonic sound also retreated from a distance. Deputy Hall Master Zhong frowned slightly. Everyone was assisting Jian Wushuang, but only he made a move to intercept. Master Zhong, we'll meet again another day. Wang Han and the others didn't care much. After completing their mission, they headed straight to the central hall, where Qiuhuang's resistance allowed them to escape directly. Heading to the northern territory to lay low was a wise choice. The matter of raiding the prison was significant, neither too small nor too large. If Lu Hua couldn't hold on, they would have to keep fleeing. However, Lu Hua had promised them. While there would be definite life-threatening situations, it was just a matter of carrying some infamy. Upon returning to the Elder Palace in the future, he would compensate them. Wang Han and the others left calmly, and Deputy Hall Master Zhong didn't pursue them. Instead, he stared intently at the Supreme Peak expert. Li Mizhou, you are truly confused. Wang Han and the others have Lu Hua's support, but who supports you? There was a hint of killing intent in Deputy Hall Master Zhong's eyes. Letting Wang Han go was acceptable, with Lu Hua providing cover. But who supported Li Mizhou and his group? That was hard to say, so these people must not be allowed to escape. By now, Jian Wushuang had already fled. Li Mizhou and the others had come to raid the prison to take away Jian Wushuang. But now he hadn't been captured and was being stopped by the law enforcement hall. Although the attack by Divine General Ma'in showed some mercy and didn't have the intent to kill, it still caused Li Mizhou severe injuries. Facing Deputy Hall Master Zhong again, it was somewhat difficult to leave. Charge out first. Once other powerful beings arrive, we're done for. Li Mizhou's face turned grim. This time, in their planning, they were careless. They didn't anticipate someone would come to rescue Jian Wushuang. If they had known, they would have stayed outside to guard. Boom! In the distance, Jian Wushuang turned around, glanced, but found nothing amiss. He just felt that the commotion was a bit too much. But that was fine. Some powerful individuals in Longevity Hall had already been distracted, and he could take advantage of the opportunity to go and seize the bride. Another terrifying aura erupted behind him, and a great battle swept through all the nearby waters for millions of miles. Jian Wushuang struggled to fly out and headed straight for Longevity Hall. Longevity Hall. Although it was far from the enforcement hall, one could still sense the clearly visible terrifying aura. That direction was the Hall of Enforcement, where Jian Wushuang was still suppressed. This made many people furrow their brows. At this moment, the guests had already taken their seats. Many wanted to go out and take a look but were stopped by Wuxia. Continue drinking. Continue dancing. Wuxia calmly raised his wine cup and said coldly, "Do you all not believe in the strength of my enforcement?" Buzz. An aura emanated from him, directly suppressing everyone present. Those who wanted to go out and see what was happening also halted their steps. Some people were on par with Wuxia, as they were all hall masters. However, the difference in strength was significant. Wuxia was the pinnacle existence among the Supreme Peak experts. Even the 3 hall masters could only contend with him. Moreover, he was the only living disciple under the Qishan, not only terrifying in strength but also possessing the secret technique bestowed by the Qishan. It was a secret technique created by the Qixin. Once activated, no one in the Elder Palace could stop Wuxia except for Divine General Mayin and others. After suppressing the scene, Wuxia revealed a cold smile. In the back hall, Tai-san, however, noticed that something was wrong but was currently in a dilemma. Was it the right time to intervene? Couldn't be delayed any longer. Hall Master, I've already ordered people to set up around Longevity Hall. 10 Tier 6 Emperor experts are stationed there. Even if Jian Wushuang dares to come, he won't leave alive. Tai-san's eyelid twitched, feeling uneasy. He spoke. Have Brother Qian personally guard the entrance. Mobilize some native emperors from the 4 great secret realms. As long as we can get through today peacefully, I'll offer 5,000 cubic universe crystals freely to them. He had invested heavily, and his manpower was insufficient. Even the native emperors were sent out. Yes. After everything was arranged, Tai-san turned and entered the inner chamber. Miaoyi, it's time. Come with me to the main hall. Tai-san spoke gently. Gong Miaoyi wore a red ceremonial dress. On this day, she didn't conceal her beauty but displayed it openly, stunning Tai-san. Although it wasn't the first time they met, the feeling of soon possessing each other, that sense of instant control, overwhelmed him. The beauty that made even Tier 6 peak-level emperors moved was truly peerless. Gong Miaoyi had a cold expression as she approached, gently linking arms with Tai-san. The two of them tore through space and instantly arrived at the main hall. Their appearance instantly broke the somewhat awkward atmosphere. Tai-san and Gong Miaoyi stood in the main positions. Today I, Tai-san, am getting married. Thank you all for coming. If you need anything in the future, feel free to ask. After saying this, they each bowed. Even Emperor Tian standing beside them was excited. Speaking of which, he was the one who introduced Gong Miaoyi to his master. Their union was a credit he would remember. However, just as the two of them were about to rise and lift their wine cups to toast everyone, a terrifying aura descended. Tai-san! Boom! Jian Wushuang, like a towering giant, descended from the sky, directly shattering the dome above the main hall. At this moment, the external sky became somewhat gloomy. Tai-san's expression changed. Knowing that he couldn't mess up his formation at this moment, he hastily shouted, "Someone, get him out of here!" Humph! Jian Wushuang sneered. "Stop yelling. I've already dealt with those country bumpkins outside." "How is that possible?" Tai-san's face darkened. If the local emperors outside couldn't stop him, that would be understandable. But Qian, his elder brother's capable assistant, was stronger than him only by a hair. How could he be defeated by Jian Wushuang? Little did he know that the people he had arranged outside had already been personally taken care of by Emperor Lu Hua. They were all completely suppressed. Everything was done silently, after all, by a supreme peak powerhouse. How could it be possible for others to find out? Jian Wushuang, today is my big wedding day. I advise you not to cause trouble. Tai-san's aura changed, ready to take action at any moment. This time, he wouldn't endure it again. At the same time, he transmitted to Wuxia in anger. "Brother Wuxia, didn't we agree to release him only after today?" Tai-san was increasingly suspicious that Wuxia was playing him. Originally, they had discussed waiting until after today to release Jian Wushuang. By then, Tai-san would take Miaoyi and leave for the Northern Territory, without worrying about Jian Wushuang causing trouble. Wuxia just casually transmitted, "Don't worry. What waves can a Tao Lord stir up? Besides, he's now a fugitive. You can take action against him. With my guarantee, everything will be fine." With these words, Tai-san's mood finally stabilized. The destruction origin source within Jian Wushuang began to be released, and it instantly fell into the Great Hall. "None of your business. Leave now." Jian Wushuang glanced at the emperors seated on both sides of the hall and spoke, "Otherwise, don't blame me if you get hurt later." As the terrifying destruction origin source unfolded, chaos ensued among the crowd. Without waiting for him to finish, they all hurriedly left. It's one thing to watch a spectacle, but being accidentally harmed is another matter. Tai San's face changed. He hadn't expected Jian Wushuang to obtain the universe origin source, and it was the destruction origin source. If it exploded in this hall, he would undoubtedly be seriously injured. Jian Wushuang, you're now a prisoner. I can freely take action against you. It's best for you to be sensible and leave now. I'll pretend nothing happened. Tai San extended his hand, speaking with a sense of righteousness. This was because the power of the destruction origin source was too terrifying. If they really fought, both he and Jian Wushuang would have an unfavorable outcome. Jian Wushuang, being an inheritor with Jinling as a safeguard, wouldn't fall easily. Tai San was different. If he went all out and Jian Wushuang killed him, the Jinling wouldn't obliterate Jian Wushuang just for an elder. On the contrary, if he killed Jian Wushuang, it might provoke the wrath of Jinling. Next to him, Gong Miaoi's expression was somewhat tense. For a moment, she couldn't tell if Jian Wushuang's words were genuine or not, and a trace of emotion appeared in her heart. At this moment, Si Tian only wanted to leave, but a force kept restraining him, preventing him from moving. The owner of this force was naturally Wuxia. Jian Wushuang had explicitly stated that Si Tian must die. The beast god weapon must be seized. This was an excellent opportunity. Jian Wushuang's eyes revealed immense killing intent. Tai San, you old dog, prepare to die. His entire thought power erupted instantly, and the destruction origin source shot out with a resounding hum. Tai San in the hall certainly wouldn't wait for death. He grabbed Gong Miaoi and attempted to flee. Now was not the time for a head-on confrontation. Escape! Tai San had only one thought. Si Tian was in a pitiful state, completely immobilized and suppressed, desperately shouting, "Save me!" In the midst of this crisis, Tai San didn't care about Si Tian's fate. He just wanted to leave as quickly as possible. Everyone must die, Jian Wushuang declared, and the candle dragon wings instantly enveloped his entire body. At the same time, Wuxia stood in front of him. Don't resist. I'll make my move after a breath. After Wuxia transmitted his message, a powerful force enveloped Jian Wushuang. Without his protection, Jian Wushuang at the core of the destruction origin source would also perish. Boom! The destruction origin source completely exploded, reducing the entire longevity hall to rubble. Then, an immense aura began to gather, forming a singular point. It was a black hole. This destruction origin source condensed the continent where longevity hall stood into a black hole. The tremendous force of engulfment devoured the entire continent. Tai San struggled within it, futilely attempting to break free. In the end, he abandoned Gong Miaoi, attempting to escape alone, but Jian Wushuang had already charged forward. Not so fast. Jian Wushuang descended, first grabbing Gong Miaoi, then holding her hand to block Tai San in his tracks. Looking down at the opponent, the hall master of Longevity Hall, once towering above all, now resembled a beaten dog. Jian Wushuang, I want you dead. Tai San was thoroughly enraged, rushing towards Jian Wushuang without caring for his own safety. Though already heavily injured, Tai San exerted all his strength from the start, even burning his origin source to restore his power to its peak. God-destroying palm strike. Tai San's peak skill, the inexhaustible God-destroying technique. With a palm strike, the God-destroying technique instantly activated, and the thought power around Jian Wushuang began to weaken, making it impossible to sense his location. Once the thought power disappeared, a cultivator became like a blind person. In the core of the distant black hole, Wuxia held Emperor Si Tian. At this moment, Si Tian pleaded, Lord Wuxia, save me. Save you. Wuxia sneered, forcibly taking the beast god weapon from him, then throwing Emperor Si Tian into the vortex of the black hole. Emperor Si Tian was full of resentment as he roared, No! He was unwilling. All the way, he had a harder journey than anyone else. In the original planet, to protect the beast god weapon, he provoked Jian Wushuang. Arriving at the grave god mountain, he was bullied by other inheritors. Now, after painstakingly climbing to this position step by step, how could he accept such a downfall? But the enormous gravitational force behind the black hole annihilated his mind, and his flesh turned into countless particles, settling into sediment. On the surface of the black hole, however, there was still the grim expression of Xian, now a misty mass. After dealing with Emperor Xian, Wuxia took a step forward, reaching the core of the black hole. Jian Wushuang, do you need my help? Now that Jian Wushuang had lost his thought power and could only hear voices, he also had a fierce determination at this moment, shouting, I can handle it! According to the plan, it was supposed to be Wuxia dealing with Tai San, and Jian Wushuang taking care of Xian. But now it had turned the other way around. The mighty Wuxia went to kill the weakest Xian, while Jian Wushuang chose to tackle the toughest challenge. Found you! A slight smile played on Jian Wushuang's lips. Without thought power, he still had life power. As long as there was a breath of life, he could sense it. A massive palm imprint came crashing down, and Jian Wushuang slowly drew the Juyun sword strapped to his back. At this moment, his temples were lifted. His robe danced with the pull of gravity, eyes tightly shut, yet he unsheathed the Juyun sword, preparing to unleash his most powerful strike. Standing behind Jian Wushuang, Gong Miaoi looked at him as if she saw her father in him, because her mother had told her that her father loved carrying a long sword on his back, and that was one of the reasons they came together. But the thought of her father made her emotional. If Tai San were to fall, what would happen to her father? Who would he turn to? Could she depend on Jian Wushuang? Although Jian Wushuang was ostensibly doing it for her now, she couldn't guarantee he would definitely help her. What if Jian Wushuang used her again and then cast her aside? At that time, because she caused Tai San's downfall, Palace Master Changfeng wouldn't spare her either. Her fate was bitter. Gong Miaoi's eyes were slightly moist, but she couldn't make any choices and could only be at the mercy of others. However, at this moment Jian Wushuang's Juyun sword was pointed at the giant palm. Then, he turned back to look at Gong Miaoi, and said with tenderness, Don't worry, I can help you with your father's matter too. As these shameless words were spoken, Jian Wushuang instantly made his move. Eternal calamity. The Juyun sword emitted a buzzing sound, a transformation of the power of life. Overwhelming sword intent descended upon the world, and a single sword strike triggered a resonance throughout the entire space. Just the aura emanating from Jian Wushuang instantly dispersed the god-destroying technique, followed by a furious shout, Annihilation! As the sword was unsheathed, the entire space was instantly leveled, and all matter was annihilated. A silence emanating from the depths of life. Anyone who came into contact with it met their demise. Tai San gazed at the sword move in astonishment, somewhat dazed, exclaiming, How can this be? How did he become so strong? But now there was no time to be shocked. He could only forcefully intervene. In the void, a massive Tao image rose, and Tai San began to fight desperately. Pointing his finger, he gathered his essence, determined to break through the sword move at all costs. The power contained in the sword move made him tremble. If he wasn't careful, he would truly fall into the hands of Jian Wushuang today. Break! The immense finger shadow collided with the Juyun sword. This finger, staked on the essence and spirit, shattered the moment it touched the Juyun sword. God Destroyer. At the moment of annihilation, Tai San's face contorted, and not only his physical body but also his divine body and origin source lost their original shapes, continuously distorting until they dissipated. Tai San had completely turned into ashes, fallen. Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes. The black hole was contracting rapidly. Originally covering the entire continent, it had now dissipated, and the black hole had become very small. He had indeed killed a peak-level Tier 6 Emperor. Although most of it was due to the destruction origin source and the clandestine assistance of Wuxia, the opponent also genuinely died at his hands. Casually collecting the opponent's mustard seed, he pulled Gong Miaoi and left the black hole. In the next moment, the black hole completely turned into a point, and then the space began to restore, everything returned to calm. In the air, a mustard seed was still floating. It belonged to Xian. Wuxia did not personally give him the beast god weapon because the plan was crucial and couldn't be disclosed to anyone, not even Gong Miaoi. Excited about this, Jian Wushuang directly put it away. As for Wuxia, he is still trapped in the black hole. A very secretive voice echoed in Jian Wushuang's mind. In 3 breaths, I will break through the black hole. At that time, you must take my blow, get severely injured, and then directly enter the teleportation array and leave, following the planned route. The voice came from Wuxia, but Jian Wushuang did not respond. He pulled Gong Miaoi and headed towards the central hall. The emperors who were watching, whether they were powerful elders from the Elder Palace or others, all looked at him and no one intervened, because Tai-san was already dead. Such a big disturbance even awakened Qingyo, who was in seclusion, but he did not appear. However, Emperor Lu Hua frowned. He was beginning to doubt his own actions. Jian Wushuang was taken out by his people, and now he killed Tai-san and was about to escape. In the future, if accountability were to come down on him, he feared. The inheritors, on the other hand, cheered loudly. Not only did they not intervene, but they even made way for Jian Wushuang. On the Demon Sound Mountain, Divine General Mayin and Lord Yunzhong stood side by side, watching everything. How should we handle this? Divine General Mayin turned to look at Lord Yunzhong, puzzled. Handle what? Just like that, we're going to let him escape? Lord Yunzhong pointed at Jian Wushuang. What else can we do? The Elder Palace had no connection with the two of them. It was only because of Zhenling that they had come here. They wouldn't meddle in internal conflicts unless a Supreme Peak was involved, especially the kind of Supreme Peak expert with unclear background details. The Supreme Peak expert being dragged by Vice Hall Master Zhong was targeted by the Divine General Mayin precisely because of the unclear details. Of course, there was a significant part of the reason for rescuing Jian Wushuang. If they were to stop Jian Wushuang, they would end up taking the blame themselves. After all, the release of Jian Wushuang and Divine General Mayin had a certain connection. Lord Yunzhong sighed and said, "Forget it. Consider it watching a good show. I seem to have misjudged Jian Wushuang's character. To be able to do something like this, it reminds me of my past brilliance." Speaking, he disappeared from sight. The Demon Sound Divine General looked somewhat disdainful. Back then, Lord Yunzhong didn't have the courage like this. In the past, he shamelessly pursued Emperor Jueyun, only to be severely injured by a slap from Emperor Jueyun. His divine body cracked open, and it took several epochs to recover. Countless gazes were fixed on Jian Wushuang. 3 breaths of time passed. A colossal centipede, tearing through heaven and earth, surged out from the black hole. Wuxia, in a light yellow Taoist robe, stood on top of the centipede. At this moment, he was filled with anger, and thunderous power emanated from his violet eyes. A thunderbolt, the size of 10,000 feet, shot out directly towards Jian Wushuang. The onlookers once again stepped back. It was Wuxia who made a move. Even if they were affected, they might perish. It's over. Jian Wushuang has seriously offended Wuxia. Many people quickly retreated. The purple thunderbolt instantly arrived behind Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang was well prepared. If he really got hit, he would fall. This could be considered a desperate move. Of course, he wouldn't really engage in a head-on confrontation. He casually took out a white jade sphere and threw it backward. The jade sphere spun wildly, then erupted with a scorching light that instantly swept across the land. Although it blocked most of the power of the purple thunderbolt, some small lightning snakes still approached Jian Wushuang. Just before those lightning snakes touched him, Jian Wushuang pulled Gong Miaoi over and shielded her behind him, actively taking the hit. Ah! The tremendous inertia caused Jian Wushuang to release Gong Miaoi's hand, and he flew backward. A burst of golden blood spewed out, and Jian Wushuang felt like his entire origin source was entangled by the electric snakes. This time, it wasn't just a simple injury. If it were just physical trauma, he could recover instantly, possessing a powerful life origin source capable of rapid healing. However, after the electric serpent entered his body, it infiltrated his origin source. To dispel it, it would take at least 100 years. This time, he exerted immense perseverance. Simultaneously, to ensure safety, he had many contingency plans. In case Gong Miaoi fled, he had a rapid rescue method. Wuxia had given him an antidote. But to test Gong Miaoi and the eyes of the Misty Shadow sect, he couldn't easily use it. Jian Wushuang covered his chest, looking up as Gong Miaoi flew over, and breathed a sigh of relief. There was no point in worrying if she would run away later. Rather, he was afraid she would run now when he was in such a state. That would be a major loss. He didn't need to escape anymore. He might as well let Wuxia kill him. Without Gong Miaoi's support, his plan would be challenging to succeed. Gong Miaoi was used to confuse Shenling. It depended on whether the other party would fall for it. Go! This time, Gong Miaoi pulled him, directly entering the teleportation array in the central hall. Qiu Huang didn't say much, just nodded, then immediately activated the formation. Moments before Wuxia descended, the two successfully escaped. Wuxia, who arrived at the scene, was extremely furious. There was no trace of pretense at all. Qiu Huang. Wuxia glared at the person in front of him, angrily shouting, "Someone, take him and throw him into the prison." As this situation unfolded on his side, a group of enforcers also arrived. Upon hearing Wuxia's command, several emperors immediately took action and directly suppressed Qiu Huang. "My lord, there's a situation in the prison," a law enforcement emperor cautiously reported. Wuxia turned his head to look. His gaze could almost kill. "Law Enforcement Hall, listen up. Immediately contact all members of the Northern Territory's law enforcement halls. Make sure to capture Jian Wushuang. Whoever captures Jian Wushuang will be rewarded with 10,000 cubic universe crystals." With these words, everyone was moved. 10,000 cubic universe crystals. In the Elder Palace, only 3 palace masters and Wuxia had such a generous offer. Keep in mind that Tai-san, who controlled Longevity Hall, had only accumulated 30,000 cubic universe crystals over the years. For a Tier 6 emperor, 10,000 cubic universe crystals were a huge fortune. The total value of a Tier 6 emperor didn't even reach 10,000 cubic universe crystals. Only a few special Tier 6 peak emperors had such substantial wealth. Not everyone had the same luck as Tai-san. Having a powerful elder brother who was a supreme peak expert and one of the 3 palace masters of the Elder Palace. He himself had risen to the position of Hall Master of Longevity Hall. Otherwise, he wouldn't have a net worth of 30,000 cubic universe crystals. Although some inheritors were tempted, Jian Wushuang's strength was too formidable, and they had no confidence. Most of the current inheritors were at the level of Tier 5 peak-level emperors. Powerful individuals who achieved Tier 6 emperor status in such a short time were mostly not in the Elder Palace. The leading wave of inheritors consisted of Tier 6 emperors, followed by the second wave of Tier 5 emperors, and the third wave comprised those who had just succeeded in becoming emperors by merging with Dao. On the Grave God Mountain, reaching the Tier 4 emperor after successfully the Dao merge was quite common. For those who had perfected the second-rank origin source Dao and achieved successful Dao merge, directly advancing to Tier 4 emperor was nothing unusual. The weakest among them were still Dao lords. In truth, these Dao lords could quickly merge paths, and their success rates were quite high. However, learning from past experiences, most Dao lords preferred to reach the perfection of the origin source Dao before attempting Dao merge. By successfully integrating the Dao in this manner, they became Tier 4 emperors, swiftly progressing to Tier 5 emperors. Seated at Tier 5, they could even aspire to reach Tier 6, or even pursue the Supreme Peak. With the support of the Qishan Temple, there was no reason for them not to strive for the utmost strength. It's worth noting that the ultimate Dao Lords, upon witnessing Hu Qing's attainment of Emperor status, directly reached the peak level Tier 5, and his combat power rivaled that of Tier 6 peak level emperors. Even Dao Lords practicing the ultimate Dao had to reach perfection before attempting the Dao merge. However, as one progressed further along the ultimate Dao, it became increasingly challenging. On this matter, Jian Wushuang had a deep understanding. Although he had perfected the extreme Dao, his ultimate sword Dao was only at the 8th level. Part of the reason was that, since mastering the extreme Dao, he had slackened in his focus on the sword Dao. However, after successfully integrating the Dao, all these issues would fade away into insignificance. After Wu's announcement, the crowd dispersed. Many contemplated taking action, but only a few were qualified to challenge Jian Wushuang. Among them were some powerful figures from the Elder Palace. As for the Tier 6 emperors in the 4 great secret realms, most lacked the capability to confront him. Currently, Jian Wushuang's combat power was on par with the top-level Tier 6 emperors. If pitted against those native emperors, he could even contend with Tier 6 peak-level opponents. As for the Supreme Peak experts, these individuals dared not move easily. They couldn't just take Wu's words at face value. What if Lord Jinling wanted to protect Jian Wushuang? That was also a possibility. Though it was said they were going to pursue and kill, no one had gone yet. It was, however, the enforcement hall in the Northern Territory that had already taken action. Upon returning to the enforcement hall, Wuxia immediately issued orders to the powerful figures of various enforcement halls to intercept Jian Wushuang. Among the enforcers mobilized, the weakest had to be at the peak level Tier 6. While there were many enforcers in the enforcement hall, those who reached the peak level of Tier 6 were no more than 10. Only 2 Vice Hall Masters could rival the Supreme Peak. Vice Hall Master Zhong was at Yuanyang Lake, and another Vice Hall Master was in the Northern Territory. The strength of that Vice Hall Master was not weaker than Vice Hall Master Zhong. Wuxia directly contacted the latter, fully responsible for capturing Jian Wushuang. Meanwhile, Vice Hall Master Zhong had already captured Li Mizhou and others. Inside the Great Hall, Li Muzhou's origin source had been bound, and now he was no different from a disabled person. Identity, mastermind, motive. Wu's voice was icy, yet deep down he was puzzled. He knew Lu Hua's capabilities well, and Wang Han and others were also Lu Hua's confidants. This much was clear to him. It was Li Muzhou who could conceal his strength and dare to raid the prison. Who gave him such audacity? Li Muzhou felt as if his heart had turned to ashes. In Wu's hands, he was finished. Fortunately, he had transmitted the information about Jian Wushuang being judged in the Elder Palace to Xinling, which could be considered a great accomplishment. As long as he did not perish, Xinling would rescue him in the future. Of course, all of this was his wishful thinking. At this moment, Xinling was mobilizing the powerful members of the Shadow Sect from the entire heavenly realm, heading to the Northern Territory to find Jian Wushuang. Who had the time to bother with a discarded pawn? Humph! Killing me won't help. Li Mizhou's mouth remained resolute. Uttering his impending death seemed futile. Better to stay silent and preserve a glimmer of hope. Wu's stood up directly, his expression darkening. Do you think that by not speaking, I'll be helpless? If that was the case, they were seriously underestimating the Elder's Palace. Without some means, how could he cleanly remove the Northern Territory's Shadow Sect? Take him away, send him to the Ministry of Punishments for interrogation. If he doesn't confess, make sure he doesn't enjoy the process. Otherwise, I'll make sure none of you enjoy it either. Wu's thundered, startling everyone present. Even Vice Hall Master Zhong couldn't help but tremble slightly. Wu's, what happened to make you so furious? A voice came from outside the hall, and then a dignified man walked in. It was none other than Emperor Lu Hua, here to witness the spectacle. Wang Han and the others had already been sent away by him. They were probably in the mortal realm by now. The Elder's Palace didn't have the authority to intervene in mortal affairs, let alone the Law Enforcement Hall. Even the White Tiger Temple in the Heavenly Realm had suppressed the Law Enforcement Hall, denying them any chance to cross into other territories. Unless Wu's personally went to apprehend someone, it was impossible to capture them. Without any evidence, he wasn't afraid. Because of this trivial matter, Xinling would certainly not blame him. Not to mention the fall of a hall master. Even if the palace master fell, Xinling would not frown. This was about perspective. Different perspectives dictated different horizons. Xinling cared more about the inheritors than these struggling old men on their last legs. In Lu Hua's eyes, reaching this point in the matter was not a problem. After all, it was just the demise of a Tier 6 emperor. Was it really worth making such a fuss? After Jian Wushuang escaped the Northern Territory, what more could Wu's do? The White Tiger Temple found joy in the spectacle and wouldn't bother with such matters. Perhaps they would even turn around and seek Jian Wushuang, trying to recruit him into the White Tiger Temple. No one bothered with Wuxia. When Wuxia saw the newcomer, his expression recovered slightly. Then he sat down on his own, asking coldly, "Why are you here? To mock me? I dare not mock you. I'm just here to remind you, based on our many years of brotherhood, not to offend those you shouldn't for the sake of trivial matters." Emperor Lu Hua's words were indeed well-intentioned. At the same time, he was buying time for Jian Wushuang, in case Wuxia, in his impatience, decided to personally seek revenge. That would complicate matters. However, this statement made the faces of some in the hall look unpleasant. Especially Vice Hall Master Zhong. He was unwilling. But the other party was the palace master, so he couldn't refute and could only clench his fists. As for the weaker elders, there's no need to dwell on them. Their strength was inherently limited, and they had little room for improvement. It wasn't wrong to say that about them. In no time, the inheritors would replace them. Now, most inheritors had already entered the realm of emperors. Given sufficient resources, Zhenling preferred to use these inheritors. However, it was currently a period of intense cultivation, everyone striving for power. Once progress stalled, they would go to the Elder's Palace or the White Tiger Temple, or even the Azure Dragon Temple to take on important roles. Emperor Lu Hua was quite open-minded about this. The future belonged to the inheritors, especially the strongest ones among them. Offending these people was unwise. Even if Wuxia was once a disciple of Qixin, that was in the past. Lu Hua Emperor didn't want to belittle Wuxia, but he knew that Wuxia had been expelled by Zhenling. Besides strength, Wuxia had nothing comparable to the inheritors. In terms of potential, Wuxia had been like this since ancient times. Having survived for so many years, now that he had restored his peak strength, there wasn't much difference from the past. In this lifetime, it was estimated that things would stay the same. Since that was the case, why not loosen up a bit and elevate one's own perspective? "You're talking so lightly." Wuxia sneered. "Jian Wushuang escaped from prison. All thanks to you. Not only did you dare to plot against me, but you also killed my sworn brother Tai-san. This matter is not over." Lu Hua sighed, saying, "This is how it ends for you." After speaking, he disappeared from view. Wuxia didn't sneer inwardly. He thought, "Let's see who laughs last." Except for those in official positions, everyone else follows Vice Hall Master Zhong to the northern region to capture Jian Wushuang. Even if you have to dig 3 feet underground or reach the 9th heaven to grab the moon, you must catch him for me. Vice Hall Master Zhong had been waiting for this moment. The words of Lord Lu Hua displeased him. He wanted to capture Jian Wushuang just to see for himself just how strong this Jian Wushuang really is. Yes. After receiving the order, the crowd didn't linger and went straight to the central hall. Qiu Huang let Jian Wushuang escape, and with Jian Wushuang captured, others naturally rose to take his place. After all the arrangements were made, only Wuxia remained in the hall. With no outsiders present, Wuxia finally breathed a sigh of relief. Sitting on the throne, he began to plan how to explain things to Zhenling. He hadn't told Zhenling about the matter of the origin source of all things. He feared that Zhenling might suddenly make a move on the giant egg within the origin source of all things. If that happened, the plan would be ruined, and his position as the palace master would be at risk. Swish! After contemplating for a long time, Wuxia would directly set off for the sea of the universe. "Master!" Wuxia respectfully stood outside the pavilion. Zhenling glanced at him and said calmly, "Has the plan started?" "Very smoothly. Jian Wushuang has already reached the northern region. I believe it won't be long before someone takes the bait," Wuxia replied. Zhenling nodded. "Good, with the success of this plan, the position of the Elder Palace will be yours. I'm sure you cursed me a lot when I removed your title in the past. The Elder Palace was originally meant for you, but you lacked significant achievements and influence. It wouldn't be wise for you to ascend to the position hastily." After hearing this, Wuxia immediately knelt down, saying with sincere fear, "I dare not. Everything was a test from Master, and I am grateful for it." Hee. You know how to talk. Jinling laughed. There's nothing else. You can leave now, but there are some matters you need to personally follow up on without any mistakes. Wu's were affirmed. Yes, the entire Elder Palace. The joy overwhelmed him, making him momentarily forget what he came here for. The giant egg within the origin source of all things. Wu's was swallowed nervously. It had been so many years without any issues. Hopefully, nothing would go wrong at this critical juncture. Originally, Wu's had planned to inform Jinling about this matter and then discuss the situation with him in the context of the current overall situation. However, in the grip of the overwhelming joy, Wuxia, with his judgment clouded, decided to keep this matter secret for now. He intended to wait until after capturing Fuego, then reveal the truth to Jinling. At that time, it would be a double joy. If he spoke now, it not only would affect the plan, but Jinling might also blame him for not mentioning it earlier. The Elder's Palace, which was about to change hands, would be lost in the blink of an eye. Jinling also sensed that Wuxia seemed to have something on his mind, but he didn't bring it up. In his view, Wuxia's scope of concern wasn't likely something significant, so he chose not to inquire. With joy in his heart, Wuxia left the Sea of the Universe directly. Soon after, a shocking piece of news spread. Jian Wushuang has betrayed and been stripped of the heir's status. Others may not be aware, but Xinling, who were paying attention to all of this, knew that Wuxia had gone to the Sea of the Universe to consult with Jinling. After meeting with Jinling, he announced this news, signifying that Jinling had given up on Jian Wushuang. For a moment, countless individuals were shaken, stripped of the heir's status. Jian Wushuang's life was probably over. Unless he became the universe master, he would be hunted relentlessly. Under the pursuit of countless powerhouses, even with outstanding talent, simply maintaining a stable path in cultivation would be a challenge, let alone dreaming of becoming the universe master. After the command was issued, the entire northern region fell into chaos. Countless people set out in search of Jian Wushuang. The indigenous emperors, who were previously hesitant, now felt completely assured and prepared to make a big move. Many peak-level Tier 6 emperors had already mobilized. Even in the Elder Palace and the Tier 6 emperors from other halls, all were on the move. All headed towards Jian Wushuang. 10,000 cubic universal crystals. Who wouldn't be tempted? Even the Supreme Peak experts couldn't help but feel moved. In the Elder Palace, there was a commotion. On the Grave God Mountain, shock set in. Jian Wushuang was the first inheritor who was taken away by a strong force without completing the trial. Now, he was the first inheritor to be deprived of his status. Not a single thing seemed to be going smoothly. The only significant event was the incident at the Beiwang Tower, but that had only happened a few days ago. News spread quickly, causing a storm in the city in just a month. And at this moment, Jian Wushuang found himself in a city on a rainy night. The northern region, Giant Gate City. This place didn't belong to any state but was a super city managing independently outside. In this city, there was an emperor at the pinnacle of Tier 6. Moreover, this emperor had a connection with the Elder Palace. Speaking of which, not long ago, Jian Wushuang had encountered this city lord. It happened in Beiwang Tower, where he was still the arrogant pride of the heavens, while the other was just an ordinary Tier 6 emperor. The native emperors of the 4 great secret realms were considered ants if they didn't reach the supreme peak. Not to mention comparing them to the inheritors, even the elders of the Elder Palace looked down upon these individuals. Yet Jian Wushuang had lost all his status, akin to a dog without a home. He couldn't even compare to a native emperor. In the dilapidated courtyard, Jian Wushuang now wore coarse clothing, while Gong Miaoi had changed her appearance into that of a short-haired, agile woman. I need time. After a few coughs, Jian Wushuang continued, I'll have to trouble you these days. Gong Miaoi crouched on the doorstep, appearing lazy, but her mental focus remained on the outside, vigilant at all times. Upon hearing Jian Wushuang's words, she felt a bit dazed. She didn't know if escaping with Jian Wushuang was a good or bad decision. However, the moment she left with Jian Wushuang, she felt an unprecedented sense of relief, especially when Jian Wushuang informed her that her father was in the mines, providing a name and even a portrait. Initially, Jian Wushuang did have a few encounters with Nie Yuan, memorizing the latter's appearance. He knew that the only way to keep Gong Miaoi in check was through Nie Yuan. Not only did he draw Nie Yuan's portrait, but he also fabricated a story. Back then, Jian Wushuang had only exchanged a few words with Nie Yuan. At that time, Nie Yuan's identity was awkward, and although there was admiration in his heart, they didn't form a deep friendship. There wasn't even a nod of acknowledgement. However, this didn't stop him from creating a story of chivalry and courage. Gong Miaoi listened attentively, completely captivated by the tale. Unconsciously, she even revealed her mother's background. With this, Jian Wushuang became even more certain. Nie Yuan met his tragic end because of a woman. Initially, Nie Yuan had asked him whether there were means on the Grave God Mountain to reverse time and space. Perhaps the other party thought that Gong Miaoi and her mother had already perished, leading to such thoughts. Afterward, he was busy escaping and didn't meet Nie Yuan again. Later, he inquired and learned that Nie Yuan had been captured by the powerful figures of Longevity Hall for some minor matter, forced to work in the mines. Jian Wushuang exaggeratedly recounted this to Gong Miaoi. Longevity Hall. Gong Miaoi's expression darkened. She had almost become the Tao companion of the Hall Master of Longevity Hall. Fortunately, she and Jian Wushuang made the judgment together. We're not far from the mine. Without using the teleportation array, I can take you there within 100 years with my speed, Jian Wushuang said sincerely because he truly intended to go to the mine. It was not just to mimic Nie Yuan's swordsmanship but more importantly to let Xinling know that he cared about Gong Miaoi. It was this concern that led him to judge the elderly palace. Once the other party believed it, they would arrange for someone to rescue him. Following the clues, as long as the other party still needed his origin source of all things, they would definitely make him meet Fuego. By then, with the descent of Xinling, everything would be complete. But he had thought too simplistically. Currently, Xinling was observing everything. Not only did he not come to rescue him, but they also informed those emperor-level experts pursuing him of his location. Deputy Hall Master Zhong, Bobby has sent a message. Jian Wushuang's hiding place has been found and is currently in Giant Gate City. Deputy Hall Master Zhong of the Law Enforcement Hall had long arrived in the Northern Territory. Upon hearing Giant Gate City, his expression turned cold, and he spoke. This thief probably planned it for a long time. The teleportation array in Giant Gate City was destroyed by that condemned thief 1,000 years ago. The Central Hall has never repaired it. It's likely related to Jian Wushuang. Hall Master, should we notify Vice Hall Master Wu Shan to join forces in the capture? No need. We are sufficient to deal with him. Let's depart immediately. Vice Hall Master Zhong was excited. He then glanced at the group before him. Ever since many traitors appeared in the Elder Palace, he had become wary of trusting his entire team. Everyone surrender all communication tokens. This matter must not be disclosed to anyone. Also, inform Bobby to watch over his people. I won't allow them to move. If you want 10,000 cubic cosmic crystals, I must have them too. Yes. However, no matter how Vice Hall Master Zhong calculated, he couldn't foresee that his immediate superior, Wuxia, was the ultimate traitor. As he made his move, Jian Wushuang received the news on his end. At this moment, he was clearing the purple thunder within the origin source while discussing Nie Yuan's matter with Gong Miaoi. After receiving the message, a smile involuntarily appeared on his lips. Vice Hall Master Zhong's group would take at least a year to arrive. He was in no hurry to leave. For safety reasons, he would leave just before the other party arrived. At this time, Gong Miaoi, breaking from her usual demeanor, spoke. Jian Wushuang, is this time really for me? Looking into her eyes, Jian Wushuang knew what answer she wanted. Without saying much, he just nodded. According to his experience, action spoke louder than words, and a sincere gaze was more important than verbal assurances. Actually, I've been paying attention to your father's matter for a long time. Since you told me about it, I asked Senior Chihuang to help me track down Uncle Nie Yuan's whereabouts. Now, we've finally found him. We can reunite in 100 years. Jian Wushuang revealed a smile, looking at Gong Miaoi. Gong Miaoi stared at Jian Wushuang, her rare almond eyes blossoming like flowers. Aren't you afraid of an ambush at the mining site? Now that they were wanted throughout the region, they would definitely investigate Jian Wushuang's motives and previous plots. It could be speculated that Jian Wushuang would go to the mines, and perhaps a heavenly net had already been laid there. Is there anything to be afraid of? Have you ever seen me scared? Jian Wushuang said indifferently. All the way from my hometown universe to this mysterious Qixin temple, I have not been afraid. Gong Miaoi curiously asked, have you ever been afraid? After Jian Wushuang finished speaking, it seemed that he remembered something. His gaze focused on Gong Miaoi, and he said with deep affection, once. There was a difficult choice once. I was afraid, but now I'm not afraid anymore. Gong Miaoi stared at Jian Wushuang with her twinkling eyes, waiting for his answer. I was afraid you wouldn't come with me. Jian Wushuang's voice was somewhat low, and his face became a bit flushed. He hadn't said such cheesy words in a long time. However, Gong Miaoi was not embarrassed at all. She acted as if she hadn't heard anything, turning her head away from Jian Wushuang. It seemed like she had found an answer deep in her heart. Her thoughts turned to the mines where her father was. At this moment, outside the mines, one of the Vice Hall Masters of the Enforcement Hall, Vice Hall Master Wu Shan, was present. Following him were several peak-level Tier 6 Emperors. Hall Master, everything is arranged. Wu Shan had a refined appearance, resembling a Confucian scholar without the aura of any practitioner. Good. You guys stay here and guard. I'll lead the others to continue the search. He was the overall commander in this operation to capture Jian Wushuang. He couldn't just wait idly here. Once everything was arranged, he began the search based on the obtained information. Unknown strong individuals spotted in Liuzhou. 4 Tier 5 Emperors seen in Hanzhou. Unidentified identities. A Tier 6 Emperor appeared in North Muzhangzhou. Not a native powerhouse. Messages kept pouring in. Wu Shan, based on this information, initiated the confirmation search. Any powerhouse above the Tier 5 Emperor needed to be inspected, leaving no one unchecked. Emperors were not Dao Lords. Wherever they went, they would attract attention. However, both Jian Wushuang and Gong Miaoi had treasures on them. Even a Tier 6 Emperor couldn't discern their true strength. Jian Wushuang was well prepared. Now, he and Gong Miaoi presented themselves as ordinary Dao Lord powerhouses, and they were the kind who wouldn't use teleportation arrays. They wandered all the way to Giant Gate City. If it were just one person, Jian Wushuang's concealed methods would be undetectable, not just by a Tier 6 Emperor but even by a Supreme Peak. The flesh transformed by 10 refinements allowed him to freely alter his origin source. His extreme Dao contained myriad Daos, allowing for easy switching. But in doing so, even Shenling couldn't find him. He wasn't truly trying to escape, he just wanted to secretly attract Shenling's attention. 80 years later, in Giant Gate City, after remaining hidden, the purple thunder within Jian Wushuang's body had completely healed. Things are going a bit too smoothly. Jian Wushuang frowned. 80 years ago, he received news from Wuxia that Vice Hall Master Zhong had already brought people here. According to the distribution of the Hall of Enforcement, someone should have arrived early. However, at the moment, he had not sensed the aura of any Tier 6 Emperor. Everything was quite strange. Moreover, when he left the Elder Palace, he did not disclose any information. Upon arriving at the Giant Gate City, not even Wuxia knew his whereabouts. Vice Hall Master Zhong, however, could receive messages. This was peculiar. Perhaps he had underestimated the enforcement hall. Fortunately, Wuxia was secretly informed him, allowing him to be prepared. With his strength restored to its peak, Jian Wushuang had nothing to fear. Currently, no Supreme Peak experts had appeared. There were only some Tier 6 Emperors, and he could handle them. It was Gong Miaoi whose strength had lagged a bit. You've recovered? Gong Miaoi saw him walk out from the room and quickly stood up. Jian Wushuang nodded and said indifferently, it wasn't a fatal injury. I've already recovered quite a bit over the years. If there were any accidents, he could instantly recover to his peak. However, there was no need for that. At the moment, he still couldn't be sure whether Gong Miaoi was truly okay. He needed to confirm once again. We've been here long enough. We need to change our location. Originally, according to his plan, they were going to hide here for tens of thousands of years. When the situation had calmed down, they would slowly move forward. However, now that they had been exposed, he had to depart ahead of schedule. Gong Miaoi was excited about this because this time they were heading directly to the mine. Tidy up. We're getting ready to depart. Jian Wushuang revealed a faint smile. They were about to face the pursuit of countless people. It was quite interesting. With his current strength, he was no longer the same as before. Among the Tier 6 emperors, except for those supreme peak existences, none were his match. Especially those native emperors. The two of them, currently identified as Dao Lords, left the massive city without any noteworthy incidents or reasons for Jian Wushuang and Gong Miaoi to depart. However, this ease and smoothness made them seem too relaxed. Zhenling like this, how could they believe it? So, before setting out, Jian Wushuang intentionally left behind a subtle and extremely hidden aura. As soon as Vice Hall Master Zhong arrived, he would be able to detect it. This aura was the purple thunder power left in his body by Wuxia. The other party wouldn't be ignorant of it. After the two left the small courtyard, that trace of thunder power reflected in a puddle. And in that puddle a face appeared. Hee. Even Jian Wushuang didn't notice this. The two headed straight towards the north of the giant gate city, where many treasures for flight, much faster than Dao Lords flying, were available. They needed to cross 19 large provinces to reach the mines, a perilous journey. Except for emperor-level powerhouses, ordinary lords monarchs usually traveled in groups. Those who dared to travel alone were ruthless individuals. Dao friends who are going to Qinghe Niu province. Hurry up. With an emperor guarding us, the journey will be absolutely safe. Guangzhou, many people shouted, attracting quite a few Dao Lords. This fellow Taoist even crossing 3 provinces, this price. A man with a fair complexion, resembling a young man, walked forward and inquired about the cost. Behind him stood a chilling young girl with short hair, looking quite capable. These two were Jian Wushuang and Gong Miaoi. The Dao Lord who shouted was not weak, estimated to have the strength of a half-step emperor. After glancing at Jian Wushuang and then scanning Gong Miaoi, he had a figure in mind. The more powerful the cultivator, the lower the fee. If they were emperors, they might even get paid because having powerhouses ensured a safe journey. This flying treasure is a rare innate treasure and not cheap. Even ordinary emperors don't possess such a treasure. In the outside world, encounters with emperors engaged in killing and plundering are rare during flights. If it's just the two of you, it'll be 60 godstones. The man in the brocade robe spoke. Rest assured, this time, there's a powerful emperor from the Qingyao Hall sitting in, and there will be no danger along the way. Fearing that Jian Wushuang might find it expensive and leave, he began explaining the benefits. Considering Jian Wushuang's current status, it was indeed a bit pricey. 60 godstones were required. Among the wandering Dao Lords, their value was quite average. A few thousand godstones would be good enough, and spending 60 godstones for a single journey was indeed expensive. Taoist brother, the strength of my companion and me is not bad. We both have the strength of Dao Lords. Normally, it's 20 godstones each for us. Why did the price suddenly increase so much? Even with a senior emperor present, it shouldn't require this much. Jian Wushuang spoke tactfully, trying to negotiate a lower price. However, as he spoke, more onlookers gathered, drawn by the discussion. The man in the brocade robe frowned slightly, worried that Jian Wushuang might affect his business. He loudly declared, "Humph, traveling with emperors should make you proud. With good luck, you might even receive guidance from the emperor. Is 60 godstones too much for such an opportunity?" As soon as he finished speaking, many people secretly cursed in their hearts. Guidance from an emperor. Who did this guy think they were? Did he take them for geniuses or fools? After reaching the level of Tao Lords, to progress further, one needed to join a sect. However, at this stage, ordinary sects wouldn't accept them. The ones with good aptitude had long entered those major sections. They were the ones sifted out, possessing only mediocre aptitude. In the eyes of the Emperor Strong, they were a bunch of fools. Who would teach a fool to speak? Jian Wushuang, however, displayed a surprised expression and readily handed over 60 godstones. Well done, that's the way. Opportunities like this are rare. The man in the brocade robe accepted Jian Wushuang's godstones, revealed a smile, and then tossed 2 jade slips to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang took them and left the city with Gong Miaoi. According to the information from the jade slips, they needed to travel 300,000 miles out of the city, where the Qingyao Hall would be waiting. Before leaving, Jian Wushuang didn't forget to ask about the departure time. According to the other party, only about 90% of the people had gathered now. However, due to the halt in the teleportation array, many powerful Tao Lords with strong backgrounds would also come to ride the flying treasures. Of course, the term strong background was relative to them. Jian Wushuang had seen truly powerful geniuses, those with attendants like Emperor's servants. Even if there was no teleportation array, they had their own flying treasures. There was no need to squeeze with a group of people. For Tao Lords, 300,000 miles were not far at all. The two of them arrived outside the Qingyao Hall leisurely. At this moment, there were hundreds of powerful individuals gathered here. Jian Wushuang was somewhat surprised. A flying treasure capable of carrying at least 1,000 people, and yet they were all waiting outside? Upon inquiring closer, he learned that the Emperor powerhouse inside was resting, and they would only set out when he allowed the Tao Lords like them to enter. Jian Wushuang was indifferent to this and found an open space to sit down and wait patiently. However, some disciples from various sects were quite indignant. Humph, just a Tier 2 Emperor, what's with the pretense? My master, a Tier 3 Emperor, doesn't make such a big deal. A man exuding the peak aura of a Tao Lord couldn't help but scoff. A Tier 2 Emperor was the lowest level among emperors in the 4 great secret realms. Despite this, they were unattainable figures in the eyes of these Tao Lords. Especially for wandering cultivators with no background, offending an emperor meant death regardless of the opponent's strength. Whatever, we won't have to wait long. Some sect disciples were indifferent to the situation. This was the advantage of having a background. Even if the opponent was an emperor, they wouldn't dare to act recklessly. In the following days, some wandering cultivators arrived one after another. The number reached 1,000. Normally, at this point, they would have left. However, due to the teleportation array being down, they had to wait a bit longer to gather more people. Since it was a one-way trip, and many wanted to go to the giant gate city on the other side, it was like having 2 opportunities at once. Roughly estimating, the round trip alone could earn at least 50,000 godstones. This was a huge profit. 50,000 godstones were enough to buy a flying treasure. Of course, this involved significant risks. If the journey was intercepted halfway, the losses would be considerable. People might even lose their lives. Moreover, the round trip, including the waiting time, took about 10 years. Maintaining a high level of vigilance for a decade was no easy task. A month later, a group of dozens of people descended, and for them, the day to leave had finally arrived. These individuals seemed not to be wandering cultivators but disciples of a sect. They wore uniform attire, and their auras were quite similar. All attention set out after one stick of incense. The one shouting was not the man in the brocade robe from earlier within the city. In transactions like these, one person couldn't handle it alone. There were many intricacies involved. The man in the brocade robe was only responsible for promotion. There were others handling navigation behind the scenes. As the crowd entered the Qingyao Hall, they discovered that besides the main hall, there were also sealed chambers separated by space. They were just not open yet. The owner of the Qingyao Hall, upon seeing the crowd enter, revealed a slight smile and then said, "Fellow Taoists, due to the teleportation array, the number of participants this time is a bit high, but the chambers are limited and simply not enough." Not enough. Someone furrowed their brows. Without enough chambers, were they supposed to stand around waiting? With so many people gathered together, how were they supposed to cultivate without chambers? Cultivation was a highly private matter. Even if they trusted each other, there were others who might not. Brother Qingniao, are all these chambers already occupied? Someone asked. Qingniao, wearing a light blue robe, stood above the main hall and laughed, saying, "Don't worry. There are indeed some chambers available. It's just that with so many people here, deciding who gets a chamber and who stays here is quite troublesome for me." Troublesome? A burly man walked out, clenching his fist and instantly releasing a powerful aura, shouting, "Then let strength speak." "No!" Qingniao stopped the man, and his own aura also burst forth, approaching the level of an emperor. Feeling the oppressive force, the burly man had no choice but to step back. "If we really do that and word gets out, how can I, Qingniao, face others?" Qingniao, hands behind his back, wore an expression of difficulty. At this moment, someone suggested, "Brother Qingniao, why not raise the price? Those willing to pay more can go to the chambers, and those unwilling can stay here." As soon as the suggestion was made, many people agreed. Originally averse to raising prices, those who had arrived first and entered a chamber for just 5 godstones couldn't even curse in secret before rushing over. Jian Wushuang, in a corner, sneered, secretly admiring the other party's methods. This way, they would inexplicably earn a large number of godstones. Could be said that he was insatiable. He and Gong Miaoi could go anywhere, and they didn't care about it. Among a group of Dao lords, there was nothing to fear. Could it be that the other party could discern his identity? Perhaps these people didn't even know about the bounty on him. After all, the disparity was too great. Those who dared to capture him were the strong among the Tier 6 emperors. Even Tier 5 emperors did not have the qualifications. As the proposal was approved, the first to enter the secret room were the disciples of various sections. These people were not primarily concerned about money. If the teleportation array hadn't stopped, they wouldn't have been here. It was a waste of time to rush on the road for several years. With this time, they could explore some dangerous places and harvest treasures, not just dozens of godstones. The weakest among these sect disciples were half-step emperors, and there were even some who rivaled emperors in strength. They could be considered the pride of heaven. As the sect disciples left, the number of people in the main hall quickly thinned out. Some strong wanderers, who were not short of godstones, also entered the secret room. The remaining majority had either insufficient strength or tight budgets. Among them was an old man, thin as dry wood, tremblingly supported by a young person as they entered the secret room. Just a glance, and Jian Wushuang and Gong Miaoi chose to close their eyes and rest in a corner. The strength of that old man was extraordinary, and he bore injuries, signifying him as an emperor-level powerhouse. Normally, a figure of his stature would possess a flying treasure, but surprisingly, he also chose to board the Qingniao Hall. There were hidden implications, but it didn't affect the two of them, and there was no need to delve into it. The journey to Qinghanyouzhou would take at least 4 years. For Jian Wushuang, this amount of time was inconsequential, just a fleeting moment. For safety's sake, he didn't immerse himself in cultivation. Instead, he remained vigilant, constantly monitoring the shifts in space and staying alert to his surroundings. The Qingniao Hall could swiftly enter the spatial interlayer, making it nearly invisible to ordinary Dao lords outside. Only those who mastered the origin source of space could detect this Qingniao Hall. This also prevented any potential ambushes. If they could be ambushed even within the spatial gaps, then the assailants were likely at least emperor-level powerhouses. At that point, surrendering and paying up would be the only recourse. Encountering ruthless adversaries, everyone would be doomed. Fortunately, in recent years, due to the significant influence of the Elder Palace, there were not many emperors bold enough to assassinate Dao lords. If they were in the Earth realm, they would likely be ambushed not long after leaving the city by those wicked cultivators. Earth realm cultivators were the most frenzied. Compared to the Earth realm, the heavenly realm was a sacred place for cultivators. Gong Miaoi's thoughts lingered on the outside world. This was their first time witnessing the heavenly realm from this angle. When he and Jian Wushuang escaped, they were focused on fleeing for their lives, paying little attention to any distinguishing features. Later, they secluded themselves in Giant Gate City. Now, riding the Qingyao Hall, she took the opportunity to appreciate the splendor of the heavenly realm. In the heavenly realm, apart from the supercities, there were also smaller towns. The supercities represented the pinnacle of each major state, primarily inhabited by Dao lords, with some Grand Yen immortals. Grand Yen immortals rarely visited those supercities. After becoming a Yen immortal, one would typically cultivate in small cities or within minor sects. In reality, those Dao lords, claiming to be wanderers, actually belonged to sects when they were weaker. However, as the world continued to expand, their sects gradually diminished. It wasn't until their strength surpassed the entire sect that they would choose to depart. After leaving, it wasn't easy to join other sects, so they wandered alone to cultivate. As for within the sect, only a remnant avatar would be left behind to instruct the younger generation. In the heavenly realm, there were predominantly mundane mortal sects and forces. These mundane mortal entities were well protected, with countless restrictions enveloping each space, creating mundane mortal worlds within. Becoming a Yen immortal was easy, but re-entering these worlds was challenging. Although emperors could freely enter, they dared not recklessly massacre mortals, as it was a major taboo for the Qixin Temple and the Elder Palace. This wasn't the Earth Realm. Even in the Earth Realm, few dared to blood sacrifice mortals. Jian Wushuang was well aware of this. In the Chaos region, he and Bai Junwang were often hunted down. Although it was a blood sacrifice within the Chaos region, some ancient beings harbored strong resentment against such acts, especially when it occurred within their territories. This would affect the Emperor's fate energy. Fortune, luck, and fate energy were mysterious things. Protecting the weak would bring fate energy, which was why some immensely powerful individuals established their own realms. Not only could they gain vast fortunes, but they could also ensure the continuation of their bloodlines. It was a win-win situation. Inside Qingyao Hall, many people discussed matters related to cultivators. While Jian Wushuang used to enjoy hearing about strange and exotic things in the past, now the gap was too significant. Even if he heard or guessed something, it was useless because the treasures obtained were too scarce. For example, a Dao Lord mentioned that in Qinghe Nyozhou, there was a spiritual mountain where Dao Lords often found scattered godstones. For these people, it was a mystery, but for Jian Wushuang, inside that spiritual mountain, there was likely a universe godstone, a stone whose internal power transformed the mountain, turning some small rocks into godstones. For Dao Lord, this was a significant opportunity. A universe godstone held considerable value. Even emperors might be tempted, but for a Dao Lord with a net worth of several 100,000 cubic units, it was no different from rubbish. Even if he wasn't being hunted, he couldn't be bothered to check. As these people conversed, a gaze fixed upon them. He, brothers, look at that young man, and the graceful girl behind him, a burly man, rubbing his exposed chest, revealed a row of yellow teeth. The Dao Lords in conversation, bored in this place where cultivation was impossible, all turned to look. Although at this moment, Gong Miaoi intentionally concealed her true appearance, her enchanting eyes captivated the onlookers. Wearing a coarse linen garment, her figure was showcased vividly. In ordinary circumstances, these individuals wouldn't behave like this. After all, each of them was a powerful Dao Lord, akin to patriarchs in the mundane mortal world. But in the presence of a fellow female cultivator of the same level, desire still stirred, just like in the mortal world. Facing unfriendly glares, Jian Wushuang turned to meet their gaze. Just one look left them stupefied. After a 3-breath pause, they finally regained their senses. With this exchange, if they dared to make a move, several of them would be severely injured, if not killed. Realizing Jian Wushuang's formidable strength, they didn't dare to be reckless and quickly averted their gazes. "Stubborn fellow, I must warn you in advance. Don't give me trouble," the leading communicator said. They were all wandering cultivators without any background, so they dared not offend people recklessly. They were all very cautious. If the other party's strength was weaker, it would be fine, but if the other party's strength was stronger than theirs, they had to be careful. The leader, after nodding apologetically to Jian Wushuang, changed positions with the others and continued their discussion. However, besides the pair of seemingly visible eyes, there were also a pair of hidden eyes secretly watching Gong Miaoi at this moment. Inside the Qingyao Hall, in a certain secret room, an old man with white hair and a distorted face, his body resembling dry wood. "Master, your injury." There was also a middle-aged man beside the old man, anxiously looking at him, not knowing what to do. The old man's eye sockets were a bit murky. Speaking of which, this time in the Qingyao Hall, several emperors were present, and each one had a significant background. Leaving aside Jian Wushuang and Gong Miaoi for now, just talking about this old man and the middle-aged man was quite extraordinary. The two of them were major demon leaders from a certain domain outside Giant Gate City. Currently wanted by the Law Enforcement Hall, they were fleeing with their disciples. Even though they managed to break out after being discovered, they also suffered serious injuries. "Zhou Tong, how much longer until we reach Qinghe Nyozhou?" The old man's voice was hoarse. Right now, he urgently needed to infuse essence blood into the origin source to alleviate his injuries. But he dared not enter Giant Gate City, and he couldn't trust outsiders either. He could only flee to Qinghe Nyozhou first and find a solution. His wanted notice didn't cover the entire region, only the Giant Gate City. In Qinghe Nyozhou, he could act without restraint. Holding a jade slip, Zhou Tong directly located the position and said, "Master, it will take 3 more years. Too slow. Since we've left the influence of Giant Gate City, there's no need to hide here. Prepare to take action." The old man's trembling body, as if on the verge of collapse at any moment, emitted a surge of demonic flames as he spoke. Unexpectedly, there's a female Tao Lord here with a unique physique. Quite a replenishing find. Zhou Tong was momentarily stunned, then used his thought power to explore the hidden chamber. Upon entering the hall, he also discovered Gong Miaoi. With a pleased expression, he said, "Master has a keen eye. I didn't notice her at first. The master was the master." Regardless of how discreet the prey was hiding, he could find it. This was also a gap in strength. Zhou Tong was only a peak-level Tier 3 emperor, while his master was a Tier 4 emperor. There was a huge disparity in strength. Let's deal with that Tier 2 emperor first. These righteous emperors, all pompous and self-righteous. A mere Tier 2 emperor, I don't know how many I've killed. Surprisingly, in front of these Tao lords, he's acting all celestial and righteous. The old man disdainfully laughed. The Tier 2 emperor was indeed quite out of line. As a Tier 4 emperor, he, despite being a demon lord, had never made such a big show. Perhaps it was because he lived in the shadows, and the Tier 2 emperor was a righteous emperor, deserving of respect. Although he might oppress those wandering Tao lords, he wouldn't casually slaughter them. Zhou Tong revealed a dark expression, and his powerful aura instantly pulled the Qingyao Hall out of the spatial crevice. Fighting in the spatial crevice was inconvenient. Once the Qingyao Hall was lost, those Tao lords would instantly lose their lives. These people were still valuable, so they couldn't be wasted like this. As the Qingyao Hall was pulled out of the spatial crevice, its speed slowed down instantly. Everyone in the hall stood up suddenly. Some Tao lords in the secret chamber rushed out as well. Caught in the fissure of space, forcibly pulled out by a powerful force, the opposing figure was undoubtedly a mighty emperor. And he was hidden in the Qingyao Hall. Because from the outside, trying to pull the Qingyao Hall out of the spatial fissure would be a direct attack. But now the Qingyao Hall seemed more like it was actively coming out. Qingyao rushed out directly from the control room, sweat appearing on its forehead. "I don't know which senior has come to the Qingyao Hall. This junior is ignorant. Please forgive me." He was extremely nervous at this moment and had already secretly transmitted a message to the Tier 2 emperor. Zhou Tong helped the emaciated old man walk out of the secret chamber and said calmly, "Brother Qingyao, don't be nervous. My master and I just can't stand it and want to leave now. It's all my fault. Please forgive me, senior. Here are 50,000 godstones. Please accept them." Qingyao turned around and directly performed a kneeling ceremony. Others might not know, but they probably thought he was overly cautious. However, only people like Qingmiao, who often ran shipping routes, understood. Once something went wrong halfway, there was an 80% chance of perishing. And the remaining 20% escaped relying on strength. He couldn't see the depth of these two in front of him. They were probably both emperors. With just a wave of their hands or a casual move, they could kill him. This was the deep wilderness, where numerous wild beasts roamed, making murder and looting too easy. Jiutong couldn't be bothered to deal with them. 50,000 godstones meant nothing to them. The orthodox path might be desolate, but the demonic path was not lacking in money. Deals that were easy money without any risk were no simpler than murder and looting. Killing all these people, along with the Qingmiao Hall, could also yield several 100,000 godstones. On the righteous path, this would be the typical net worth of a Tier 3 emperor. On the demonic path, a Tier 3 emperor's value could rival those of complete stage Tier 4 emperors. That's why disdain was cast upon them. After killing these individuals, everything would rightfully belong to them. Once these people were dead, their unsightly demise would go unnoticed. There was no need to sacrifice one's prestige before these insignificant ants. Thinking of escaping? Jiutong snorted coldly and instantly took action. His arm extended for thousands of miles, directly seizing the Tier 2 emperor who had been hiding in the most secret chamber. He had almost escaped just a moment ago. Elder, spare my life. I once followed the venerable Lai Hua. Venerable Lai Hua? Jiutong sneered. Even if the great venerable Lai Hua hasn't fallen, I've got you in my grasp. No matter how far this place was from Liuzhou, he wasn't afraid, even if the venerable Lai Hua hadn't fallen. Crucially, venerable Lai Hua had already perished, and the temple had disappeared from the northern borders. This was the domain of the Elder Palace. If it were the Enforcer Hall's people, he might still be concerned, but the name of a dead person wouldn't frighten him. Whoosh! A tremendous force instantly melted the Tier 2 emperor, turning him into blood that entered the body of the elderly man. With this drop of essence, the old man's appearance slightly improved, but it was far from enough. To fully recover, he would need to absorb the essence of a Tier 4 emperor. Casually killing a Tier 2 emperor in front of these Dao lords immediately caused panic. Many started introducing themselves. I, Wang Kuan, a son-in-law of the Dingtian Xiaojia, my ancestor is a peak Tier 4 emperor. Please spare me, elder. I am Wang Lan, the chief disciple of the Green Mist Gate. Please. Killing all these people, along with the Qingmiao Hall members, could yield tens of thousands of godstones. Qingmiao's face turned pale as he looked at those Dao lords who proudly declared their identities, finding the situation rather amusing. Speaking of backgrounds, his own was formidable. If he encountered a team specializing in assassinations and announced his name, it might have some utility. However, the two individuals before him were clearly different, most likely major villains. Survival was out of the question, especially with the approach of revealing one's identity. It might even lead to a quicker death. Jiutong scanned the crowd, nodding and smiling. You all are truly adorable. Each one of you is like a beauty, presenting one pretense after another. Keeping you alive is truly a waste of resources. Whoosh! Hundreds of people who had previously stood up to declare their identities instantly transformed into blood mist, ultimately condensing into a drop of essence. Jian Wushuang, sitting in the corner, couldn't help but exclaim, "This is something else." These two were even more professional than he had imagined. It seemed they had a lot of experience in this profession. The ability to instantly transform cultivators into essence indicated mastery of a supreme technique. Moreover, it seemed to be a profound skill related to the blood origin source. In Jian Wushuang's eyes, there was a hint of curiosity. His knowledge of blood Dao was limited. He had once acquired a blood Dao technique from Xinling's forces, but it wasn't a complete one. Although it was only in its early stages, the power it contained was by no means weak. Such techniques were considered part of the demonic path, usually not practiced by ordinary people. Unless it was a demonic technique like the heavenly demon art, which straddled both righteousness and wickedness and didn't pose a threat to anyone, except for the fact that its inheritors were once demons. Blood Dao, on the other hand, was different. Anyone who practiced it would inevitably tread the path of the demonic. Jian Wushuang didn't dislike this kind of demonic path. In the struggle for survival, one had no choice but to accept the law of the jungle. Unable to be restrained, even though the heavenly realm was relatively stable and rarely saw the emergence of major villains among the emperors, there were still some who dared to try. Just like those wandering cultivators at the bottom, unable to progress in cultivation, lacking potential and without powerful backers, they could only choose the path of blood, as it offered a quicker path to advancement. The temptation was hard to resist, except for those with exceptional talent and a good background. Jian Wushuang sighed. According to the plan, he was supposed to ride Qingyao Hall to Qinghe. Now, it seemed that the plan couldn't keep up with the changes. If he had known earlier, he would have dealt with these two individuals in advance. The Great Tao was arduous, and no one had an easy journey. He wouldn't show mercy. Whose path was easy? None. Regardless of right or wrong, he only saw the essence. There was no absolute right or wrong, just excuses each created for themselves. The withered old man regained a hint of color and did not rush to deal with those wandering cultivators. The difference in strength was too great. They posed no threat to him, so there was no need to be in a hurry. His target was the cornered Gong Miaoyi. Young lady. The withered old man squinted his eyes, his voice soft, but the gleam in his eyes was full of killing intent. Gong Miaoyi did not resist but instead glanced at Jian Wushuang. Get ready to act. This is the deep wilderness, and the Elder Palace's reach can't extend this far. Jian Wushuang calmly transmitted his voice. Once these people were dealt with, he could easily change his identity and fly over. Alternatively, he could continue to use Qingyao Hall as cover. But these wandering Tao lords couldn't be left alive. Young lady, prepare to sacrifice yourself for your master. The withered old man took out a scepter, raising it high with both hands, seemingly performing some kind of ritual. Gong Miaoyi, though approaching with lifeless eyes, had a mind as clear as a mirror. Killing these people was too easy, but to avoid exposing themselves, it was best to conceal their methods and use other powers to eliminate them. For example, relying solely on the physical body. As Gong Miaoyi walked slowly towards the withered old man, everyone held their breath. If there was any doubt before, now it was certain these two were undoubtedly demonic path emperors. They were truly in trouble. Hall Master Qingyao knelt on the side, cold sweat already seeping from his forehead. He was unwilling to perish like this. Just as the withered old man performed the ceremony, a thread of thought quietly slipped out from the Hall Master's mind. He intended to sacrifice a trace of his origin source, abandoning his flesh and escaping with his divine body. Even if he died in the deep wilderness, he didn't want to be ravaged to death by demonic emperors. Phew! The thread of thought power was very weak. A typical emperor might not have noticed it, but Emperor Jiutong, a peak-level Tier 3 existence, detected it as soon as Qingyao released it. TSK. Brother Qingyao, you are not honest at all. As Emperor Jiutong spoke, a faint light shone on his jet-black fingertips, piercing through the Hall Master's origin source. Instantly, he perished. The thread of thought power that had extended from Qingyao's mind also dissipated. The wandering cultivators were already in despair. Initially thinking about putting up a fight, they now had no chance at all. Dealing with them was too easy. Emperor Jiutong looked at the desperate cultivators with a playful smile, revealing a scornful expression. However, at this moment, his master's eyes suddenly contracted, and a gush of hot blood sprayed from his mouth. Black blood flowed down from the corners of his mouth. His voice hoarse, "You!" With a stiff arm pointing at Gong Miaoyi, he then crashed to the ground. This time, it was the turn of Emperor Jiutong to feel despair. He hadn't reacted yet. He just turned his head to see that his master had already perished. Then, he saw a wandering cultivator whom he had never looked at directly before, standing beside his master's corpse, hands covered in blood. Splash! Jiutong was so frightened that he immediately knelt down and begged for mercy, saying, "Senior, spare me. It was his threat that forced me to do this. It has nothing to do with me. This is how cultivators of the demonic path are. They care about nothing when it comes to saving their own lives. Just after the sect master was killed, Zhou Tong immediately switched sides. At this moment, the wandering cultivators also realized what was happening and began to retreat one after another. Everything was so spectacular, with one wave subsiding only for another to rise again. This time they truly understood the saying, "If you don't suffer losses, you won't learn." Several emperors who had been in hiding successively appeared, and by now 2 emperors had already fallen. Where to look with such a scene? Even if they fell this time, it was worth it. Annihilate. Jian Wushuang just said one word, as if his words were commands. Zhou Tong's body began to dissipate, then turned into a phantom. Zhou Tong watched helplessly as his physical body shattered, followed by the rupture of his divine body and the depletion of his origin source. Before his fall, he finally understood the strength of the opponent he had just faced. It was a legendary peak-level emperor. Although it was a miscalculation, Jian Wushuang's life power was indeed comparable to the means of those supreme peak existences in killing emperors of this level. But if it came to dealing with supreme peak existences, his means would be somewhat inadequate. The power of supreme peak emperors was terrifying. Even with a special life power, it was impossible to fight against them across tiers. Moreover, the strength of supreme peak emperors was not just about power. It also involved a profound understanding of space, far surpassing ordinary emperors. When an emperor's cultivation reached the black hole realm, he would be tier 6. To advance to the supreme peak realm, a tier 6 emperor needed to elevate their understanding of space to the level of the universe. Alternatively, they could create their own universe secret technique. Achieving either of these could lead to reaching the supreme peak realm. As for the indigenous emperors of the 4 great secret realms, their origin sources had defects, making their spatial origin source weak. It was challenging for them to reach the cosmic or universe realm. Therefore, most of the supreme peak existences in the 4 great secret realms had to create cosmic secret techniques. The realm of the spatial origin source remained at the level of black holes. Even attempting to elevate it to the peak was incredibly difficult. For these inheritors, their origin sources were born from the original universe, complete regardless of strength. However, even with this advantage, elevating the spatial realm to the level of cosmic space was still a formidable task. In terms of cultivation time, compared to the emperors of the 4 great secret realms, they were at a disadvantage. Hence, there were very few supreme peak experts. To the extent that the original universe had no supreme peak experts, not even a tier 6 emperor. In the river of time and space, tier 6 emperors were rare, with most being tier 5 emperors. The emergence of the Qixin Temple was the reason for the sudden appearance of so many strong individuals. However, as time passed, even without the Qixin Temple, numerous powerful individuals would still emerge. The arrival of the Qixin Temple merely accelerated the progress of this river of time and space. Take Shang, for example. Before entering the Qixin Temple, he had already elevated his spatial realm to the cosmic level and even created the embryonic form of cosmic secret techniques. Crossing into the tier 6 was easy for him, and he could quickly join the ranks of supreme peak experts. However, lacking guidance, he took some detours. With the personal guidance of Zhenling later on, the cosmic secret techniques flourished, and the cosmic space was perfected. All that was left for him was to challenge the barrier to break into the realm of the Universe Master. If not for the guidance of Zhenling, this process would have been very lengthy. Jian Wushuang was no exception. Without the appearance of Qixin Temple, there wouldn't have been the skeletal army, and without mastering heart power, accidentally entering the starry sky and subsequently grasping the extreme Tao wouldn't have happened. It was a great Tao explored from within heart power. Under normal circumstances, even if handed to you, you wouldn't be able to cultivate it. In this, there were external factors, personal efforts, but more importantly, someone was pushing everything forward. Pushing an immature temporal river to its peak could be considered as forcing the seedlings to grow. In Qixin Temple, after reaching the supreme peak, there was nowhere else to go. Even in the outside world, there were very few at the supreme peak, and the transmission of inheritance and opportunities were quite ordinary. This would cause them, after reaching that level, to lack a sense of crisis and subsequently stagnate. Whether this was good or bad remained uncertain. Jian Wushuang's thoughts stirred, and he seemed to have made some preparations for the future. Present planning remained the core. Mastering the matters of Qishan Temple was still distant. Beside him, Gong Miaoyi noticed Jian Wushuang's distraction and asked, "Are we leaving directly?" Gong Miaoyi turned her head to glance at those wandering Dao lords. Jian Wushuang nodded and said, "I never kill the weak. Don't forget, this is the deep wilderness. Even if they can survive and get out, it will probably take tens of thousands of years. The core of Qingyao Hall has been destroyed, and without the protection of Qingyao Hall, surviving is already fortunate for them." But as his words fell, in the distant sky, a huge black dragon suddenly appeared, charging towards their location without any regard. Compared to Qingyao Hall, the dragon was like a grain of sand, disappearing instantly. An ancient desolate beast? Jian Wushuang frowned. They shouldn't be so unlucky. First, Qingyao Hall encountered problems, and then they ran into this level of ancient desolate beast. In places in the heavenly realm without cultivators, it is considered desolate. It was truly desolate. The remaining desolate beasts are very few, especially powerful ones. Like this ancient desolate dragon with the strength of a Tier 6 emperor, they were even rarer. Once they appear, it's likely to quickly attract a large number of powerhouses for siege. This is a feast of gluttony. A head of an ancient desolate dragon is probably worth 10,000 universe crystals. Still a matured great Mahayana body dragon. If it were usual, Jian Wushuang would feel like he was chosen by fate, able to encounter such a genius treasure in the great desolation. But now is different. He's being hunted, and he doesn't have time to enjoy this. Its target is us. Gong Miaoyi's brows furrowed slightly. Her strength is only at the Tier 5 peak level. If it were a Tier 6 emperor from the 4 great secret realms, she could still contend. But this ancient desolate dragon in front of them not only surpasses the cultivators of the 4 great secret realms but is even stronger than some Tier 6 emperors among the inheritors. According to the strength classification of Beiwang Tower, this dragon probably already has the peak strength of Tier 6. It was similar to Jian Wushuang's current strength. Once entangled, it's probably very difficult to break free. But if they want to leave, it's not that easy either. Since we've encountered it, let's kill it. Jian Wushuang revealed a hint of killing intent. Sword Qi instantly descended, and that absorbed aura burst forth instantly. The ancient desolate dragon roared to the sky, circling in the air, blocking out the sun. "You, a petty Dao lord, dare to act so recklessly in front of me." The ancient desolate dragon spat out words, its huge eyes staring at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang sneered, "Just a beast. Do you really think I can't kill you?" The Juyun sword was drawn in an instant. He didn't want to waste time. Fight if he could. Retreat if he couldn't. The sudden appearance of the ancient desolate dragon was unexpected, and the fact that it recognized Jian Wushuang as a Dao Lord made it even more peculiar. Although he voluntarily leaked his aura, the sharp sword intent rivaled that of a Tier 6 emperor. Surprisingly, the opponent showed no astonishment. There was probably some conspiracy at play here. However, Wuxia had yet to relay any information to him. He had no idea who was scheming behind the scenes. Perhaps it was a deity or another strong figure from the enforcement hall. But if the enforcement hall discovered him, Wuxia would surely know. Jian Wushuang, wielding the Juyun sword, took a step forward and was already beside the ancient desolate behemoth. Die! He didn't hold back at all. And the first strike he unleashed was annihilation. The sword pierced through the body of the ancient desolate dragon. Its size was immense, and its speed was slow, no chance to evade. But then Jian Wushuang was stunned. He only knew that the strength of desolate beasts was formidable, but he was unclear about the specific aspects. Now he understood. His most powerful strike only managed to break some of the opponent's soft armor, not even causing minor injuries. The terrifying defensive power was probably on par with a supreme physique, and the divine body could rival an emperor with 60,000-fold. You! Feeling the injuries on its body, The ancient desolate dragon roared to the sky, shouting angrily, "You actually managed to break my scales. You deserve to die." A pitch-black mist spewed from its mouth, plunging the already dim sky into complete darkness. In the darkness, the dragon moved, and its claws unexpectedly reached out towards Jian Wushuang. The sharpness of its claws made Jian Wushuang's heart race. In a moment of trance, he was reminded of Si Tian's claw technique. Then, a great joy welled up within him. This dragon had a connection with the candle dragon. It was the power of bloodline. This ancient dragon must have the bloodline of the candle dragon, with some innate inheritance within that inheritance being the candle dragon's claw technique. Originally feeling quite tricky, prepared to give up the fight with this dragon, it would be better to leave directly. With his speed, he could soon escape. But now it was unnecessary. Having a bloodline connection with the beast god candle dragon, if he could slay it, using the essence and flesh on its body might be able to restore the candle dragon weapon. Thinking of this, in order to provoke the opponent, Jian Wushuang exposed the candle dragon weapon on his body, which had lost its power. Buzz! The candle dragon wings suddenly shook, directly dispelling the black mist. Then, with a shake of his wings, he instantly appeared next to Gong Miao, lifting her up in his arms. At this level of battle, she couldn't intervene anymore. "You leave first. Leave this to me." Jian Wushuang put down Gong Miao and handed her a token, saying, "Head north with it. I'll catch up with you soon." Gong Miao, not indecisive, nodded and said, "Be careful." Then she quickly left the area. The ancient dragon emerged its massive head from the black mist, billowing black fog from its rugged nostrils, staring fixedly at the candle dragon wings on Jian Wushuang's body. Jian Wushuang also noticed the opponent's gaze, and then the candle dragon armor on him lit up. "I also have this," Jian Wushuang shouted angrily. Buzz! Candle dragon wings spread in an instant. His left hand clenched into a fist, and crimson stripes appeared on his arm, containing the power of the beast god. However, these stripes couldn't connect with the wings. At his brow, the eye of candle dragon also emerged. The ancient dragon became angrier as it looked. That was something from its ancestor. Before it could unleash its fury, Jian Wushuang took the initiative, imitating the dragon's claw. His palm transformed into the candle dragon claw. Hiss! In the sky, black mist was swallowed by 5 spatial rifts. These rifts were left by the beast god claw. Although they lacked the power of the beast god weapon, they contained abundant life power. Although the opponent didn't suffer any substantial damage from this claw strike, the insult was significant. "Cultivator, you have angered me. I will have you dead." Jian Wushuang sneered. "Weren't you angry from the beginning?" Although the opponent was already a Tier 6 emperor, judging from the conversation, their wisdom was mediocre. No wonder they were called desolate beasts rather than demonic beasts. The ones Jian Wushuang encountered in the Western Sea were demonic beasts. It was strange. Some powerful demonic beast experts preferred to call themselves desolate beasts. Desolate beasts had low intelligence, unable to compare with demonic beasts. The only strength they possessed was their own power. Demonic beasts were similar to human clans, with great reproductive capabilities and decent intelligence, reproducing at a fast pace. In some original universes within the River of Time, situations had arisen where the entire universe consisted of demonic beasts. The struggle for existence. In some original universes, certain errors led to an imbalance in the chi, resulting in the emergence of a singular group of beings. In the universe where he resided, the human race dominated, with few powerful members of the demon race. This was also a drawback of the original universe. It was the same in the divine power universe. Being too singular was not ideal. Divine power and void power could coexist. If a universe master intervened, they could directly refine the two into a unified whole. Unfortunately, their temporal river lacked a universe master. In the battle against the ancient dragon, Jian Wushuang found it effortless. Although he couldn't severely damage the opponent, the dragon found it challenging to harm him. Couldn't even touch him. The difference in speed was too great. On his journey through space, He had come a long way and was about to master the realm of black holes. However, the ancient dragon, even when entering the gaps in space, had to forcefully shatter the void. It was quite clumsy. Tao image. Jian Wushuang appeared behind the dragon, chanting, and a massive manifestation of the Tao image appeared behind him. It was the symbol of the origin source. The pale green gigantic Tao image made Jian Wushuang appear benevolent. That was the source of life. The ancient dragon tilted its head, its massive eyes fixed on Jian Wushuang, revealing a hint of panic. It thought the ancestor had descended. That was the oppressive force of bloodline. How is this possible? The ancient dragon roared in disbelief, unable to continue. How could the mere human race suppress my bloodline? They had been engaged in a battle for quite some time, and the opponent had been playing a cat-and-mouse game all along. However, he was exploring, probing for the opponent's weaknesses. It wasn't easy to kill this ancient dragon. Direct confrontation was disadvantageous. He could only seek unconventional methods. In the end, he discovered that it was related to the power of life. For a moment, his head spun, either due to the opponent being too foolish, affecting his judgment. At this level of ancient colossal beast, the most feared was the suppression in the bloodline. The power of life was the most effective against it. You foolish creature. In the presence of the ancestor, you don't even pay your respects. Jian Wushuang merged with the Tao image. His figure instantly transformed into a colossal candle dragon spanning billions of miles. As the momentum rose, the aura of the candle dragon was remarkably similar. The ancient dragon was once again shocked. Ancestor couldn't distinguish between real and fake for a moment. As a Tier 6 Emperor-level ancient dragon, it possessed only a trace of the bloodline power of the candle dragon. It had never encountered the real candle dragon, only vaguely sensed it through the bloodline inheritors. Kneel. The aura of the transformed candle dragon by Jian Wushuang was incredibly ferocious. There was a true kingly aura, as if descended from the heavens. The innate beast gods, each one was a peak universe master, essentially a king. The ancient dragon, upon hearing the command to kneel, softened its 4 claws for a moment, almost kneeling on the ground. Then, it came to its senses, roared in anger, and rushed towards Jian Wushuang to fight desperately. You dare to deceive me? The ancient dragon was greatly infuriated. Jian Wushuang shook his head. It was somewhat uninteresting, feeling like battling a child. Life universe. Buzz. In the depths of the desolation, the withered vines and rotten leaves began to burst with powerful vitality. A struggling wildcat in the mud puddle, sensing the intense power of life, instantly broke free, only one paw visible before, now entirely emerging from the mire. The weak and dying demonic beasts, touched by the force of life, revived and erupted with tremendous life potential. A near-death patient sat up in astonishment. But that's about it. Within the life universes enveloping billions of miles, everything was revived. A faint bit of fate energy gathered within Jian Wushuang. This move not only had the power to kill enemies but could also plunder fate energy. Assisting the weak would gain the fate energy origin source from the Qixin Temple. Though it was somewhat insignificant, using the life universe in some mortal realms would likely garner a massive amount of luck and fate energy. However, he had not yet achieved the status of emperor, so fate energy was somewhat redundant for him, offering little significant aid. Moreover, he had no leisure or interest in gathering luck. Not refining pills, not establishing a family or force. Having so much fate energy was useless. It was better to improve one's strength. In the outside world, it was different. Like the past Jin Wuyang, gathering fate energy was because he was already invincible in the Great Sea region, having no room for improvement, only able to play with luck. After arriving at the Qixin Temple, it was a constant and thrilling place for inheriting legacies. There was no time for such things. It was too low-level. All life enveloped within the universe underwent transformation. Yet the ancient desolate dragon alone continued to weaken steadily. The power of life was suppressed, and bloodlines began to dissipate. Without the bloodline of the candle dragon, the levels of life were also suppressed, and apart from the physical body, all abilities grew weaker. The divine body rapidly declined, and although the physical body was not greatly affected, it began to lose a significant amount of vitality. The once existent healing ability was no more. In other words, each of his attacks became a massive trauma, one that could not be healed. Despair. Jian Wushuang held the Jueyun's sword upside down, gazing at the ancient desolate dragon. The candle dragon's Tao image did not disperse. It stood firm in the sky, staring at the ancient desolate dragon, while his true body charged forward, ready to slaughter. The exchange between the two was not too swift. They had already been deadlocked for an hour.